A 5-year-old girl returns after a harrowing abduction, carrying silent eyes and wordless nightmares. She doesn't speak, she doesn't cry. She only draws and clings tightly to her therapy dog. But from those seemingly meaningless lines and through the tireless efforts of a devoted doctor and a loyal companion, the truth begins to emerge. A horrifying crime. Are you curious to know what happened in that darkness and why a child who says nothing becomes the most crucial witness of all? Step into this haunting story. Let's begin.
It was a clear spring morning in a peaceful suburban neighborhood. Golden sunlight spilled gently over a small garden in front of a white painted house with a red tiled roof. Tulips and wild daisies swayed softly in the breeze, quivering as if laughing in delight. In that quiet garden, a tiny girl sat cross-legged on the grass, clutching a crayon, carefully drawing a butterfly the size of her hand on a piece of paper. Her name was Amanda Miller, 5 years old, the kind of child people adored the moment they met her. She had soft, golden hair that shimmered like early morning sunshine, often tied neatly into two little buns by her mother. Her eyes were clear, radiant blue, round and bright like twin drops of autumn lake water, always full of wonder and curiosity about the world around her. Amanda's skin was fair with a rosy hue, her cheeks blushing like ripe peaches. Petite in frame, she usually wore light, airy dresses adorned with cheerful patterns of flowers or animals she loved. Gentle, obedient, and full of affection, Amanda enjoyed tending to plants, watering flowers, and whispering stories to her dolls. But what truly made her special was her passion for drawing. Since she was only 3, she had been creating colorful, expressive pictures that brimmed with emotion. Each afternoon, she would unroll sheets of paper on the porch and sketch scenes from her world: the neighbor's cat, a red bicycle, or the sky dotted with drifting clouds. And Amanda laughed with a voice as clear as silver bells. Whenever she giggled, her laughter rang through the house, as if the very air itself had been lit up with joy. Her father, Jacob Miller, around 35, was a tall, slender man with light brown hair and thin-rimmed glasses. A civil engineer by profession, he was quiet and reserved, but deeply devoted to his daughter. Despite a demanding job, he always made time each night to read Amanda a bedtime story. On weekends, he would take the family on picnics or help Amanda build cardboard models of towering castles, her paper palaces as she proudly called them. Her mother, Emily Miller, about 33, was a gentle, attentive preschool teacher. She wore her black hair in a low ponytail, her kind face framed by soft features and a soothing voice. Every morning, she would prepare breakfast for the family and braid Amanda's hair into sweet, whimsical styles. A lover of flowers, she had passed that love on to her daughter. Together, they would plant daisies and sunflowers in the garden, competing to see whose flower would bloom first. Though both parents were busy with work, the Miller family held fast to one precious tradition. Dinner was always shared together, no matter how late. Those meal times were sacred, a moment to talk, to laugh, and to share their days. The Miller home was modest in size, but warm and filled with love. Amanda's drawings lined the hallway walls, a colorful mosaic of childhood joy. Her bedroom was a haven of stuffed animals, picture books, and neatly organized crayons. Each night when the little moon-shaped nightlight was turned on, Amanda would nestle into her mother's arms and tell her about a purple dragon she had imagined, or a flying fairy with sparkling wings. It was a world full of tenderness and tranquility. a place where love bloomed in every corner and nothing seemed like it could ever go wrong. In that seemingly perfect scene, a strange wind passed through. Not strong, not cold, but just enough to disturb the gentle rhythm of the afternoon, like an invisible hand had brushed the surface of a still lake, sending out the very first ripple. No one noticed. Happiness continued to hum, soft and steady, like a familiar melody. Until that single off note began to spread, quietly, subtly, dampening the entire song. That afternoon, the sky was a pale gray, like a canvas drained of sunlight. Wispy clouds drifted lazily overhead, thin as mist. In the Central Park, life carried on with cheerful noise, the shrieks of children at play, the soft screech of bicycle tires against the brick path, and the occasional call of mothers urging their little ones home before the rain arrived. As usual, Amanda had come to the park with her mother. Before settling on a nearby bench, her mother reminded her gently, "Stay close, sweetheart. I'll be right over there reading. Come back when I call you, all right?" Amanda nodded earnestly, then skipped off toward the grassy area where a green swing hung beneath an old tree. Her white dress, printed with tiny purple flowers, fluttered behind her with every light step. Tucked under one arm was her sketchbook, in the other, a small box of crayons. She found a quiet spot beneath a tall maple tree where sunlight trickled through the leaves like stardust in daylight. There, she sat cross-legged and began to draw, completely absorbed in her imagination. Today's picture was of a flying cat, its wings brilliant and colorful like a rainbow caught in motion. Laughter rang out nearby as a group of children chased the soccer ball across the open field. In the distance, Amanda's mother sat calmly on a stone bench, a book resting on her lap. Every now and then she would glance up, eyes soft with love, following the quiet movements of her daughter beneath the tree. Then, like a stroke of black ink bleeding into a painting, a shadow appeared in the corner of the park. Lucas Garcia, around 40 years old, had an average build, wore a charcoal gray windbreaker, dark jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. His face was cold, devoid of expression. His eyes were hollow, deep-set, like twin wells of darkness. He didn't look like someone out for a stroll. No dog, no bag. He didn't glance at the trees or the flowers, only at the children. He sat on a stone bench far from the playground, but his eyes never stopped scanning the scene. His lips moved slightly, not reading, not humming, just mumbling something to himself, low and strange. And then Lucas stood. He began walking, slowly, unhurriedly, as though merely passing through. He stopped just a few steps from Amanda, then slowly crouched down to her level. "Hey there," he said, voice calm, smooth, like a breeze brushing through the grass. "What are you drawing?" Amanda looked up. Her blue eyes met his, eyes that were dark, deep, and unfamiliar. There was no smile in them. She froze for a beat, then dropped her gaze to her picture. "I'm drawing a cat," she whispered, voice as soft as the wind. Lucas smiled faintly and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a spiral lollipop wrapped in shiny pink and yellow foil that shimmered in the sunlight like a toy. "I've got candy. It's really good. Would you like one?" Amanda shook her head ever so slightly. Something inside her, an instinct, ancient and quiet, began to stir with unease. Her eyes dropped to the grass. Her small fingers gripped her crayon a little tighter, as if reaching for something solid. I I don't take candy from strangers, she murmured, her throat suddenly dry. Lucas kept smiling, but something in his eyes narrowed, like a crack forming in a mask. I'm not a stranger. I'm a friend of your mother's, he said, his voice smooth as silk, but laced with something slippery and cold underneath. Amanda looked up, confused. She didn't recognize this man. Who are you? Lucas's smile deepened, his gaze misting over like glass on a rainy day. Your mom asked me to walk you home. She's very worried. He extended his hand gently, as though he were someone familiar. Amanda's brows knitted, a chill rising in her chest like a cold wave in her stomach. She took a small step back, her voice barely audible. Mom didn't say anything. It's all right, sweetheart. His tone dipped, darker now, a breath away from a whisper. In a flash, Lucas drew a folded gray cloth from his pocket and pressed it hard against Amanda's mouth. Her cry was muffled, trapped in the fabric. The stench hit her like an invisible fist. Old fabric, mold, and a strange chemical odor rushed into her nose, burning and suffocating. Amanda's tiny body curled instinctively, her hands clawing, pushing, flailing through the air in desperation. But it was too late. Lucas hoisted her up effortlessly in both arms, spun on his heel, and bolted toward the thicket behind the park without a glance back. Amanda was pressed hard against his chest, her face buried in his coarse jacket that reeked of smoke and sweat. Her knees knocked painfully against his ribs with every bounding step. The world flipped and blurred in her inverted gaze. The sky turned upside down, trees spun like wheels, the ground pulsed and jolted beneath them. It felt like falling into a bottomless nightmare. Tears sprang from her eyes, not from pain, but from pure, consuming fear. She didn't know where she was going, or if anyone had seen. She reached blindly, grasping at the air. One of her shoes slipped off, falling silently behind. Lucas tore through a narrow trail winding through the trees, where the grass had been flattened by many footsteps before. In the dusky light, a dark red truck loomed, barely visible behind two large tree trunks, its surface caked with dust, scattered twigs and leaves clinging to it like camouflage. Breathing hard, Lucas yanked open the back door. There were no seats, just an empty metal chamber, dim and grim, strewn with burlap sacks, lengths of rope, and a torn duffel bag. Without a word, he flung Amanda inside like a discarded object. Her small body slammed into the wall of the truck, her head striking the wooden edge. The world burst into stars. A wave of dizziness surged through her, light flickered in and out across her vision. Everything began to spin, and then she felt herself slipping, fading into a deep and endless dark. The door slammed shut. Everything went black. No more light. No way back. Only a thick, suffocating darkness, like tar, consuming Amanda's world whole. She lay motionless, curled tightly inside the narrow compartment of the van, a rusty metal box that felt smaller with each passing second. The space around her distorted. Shapes melted into shadows, and only sound remained, the thud of impact, the hiss of shifting metal, and the cold, yawning silence between. Outside she heard his footsteps, heavy and steady, circling the vehicle. Each step felt like the ticking of a clock counting down to something terrible. Then, screech! The groan of rusted hinges stretched into the silence like a scream held too long. Clack! A sliding bolt, a heavy padlock, a sealed world, no exit. Amanda hugged her knees to her chest, crouched in the syrup-thick darkness. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, as if she were drowning on dry land. Each inhale stabbed at her lungs. Her throat burned like it was lined with thorns. The air was thick with the stench of rust, old leather, damp mold, and something else, something faint and sickly sweet, like decay. She began to cry, but no sound came. Tears slipped quietly down her dirt-smudged cheeks, soaking the sleeves of her dress. She wanted to call out. She wanted to scream for her mother, but her throat was locked, sealed by terror. Only one word escaped. Mommy. So soft, even she couldn't hear it. A faint vibration stirred from the far corner of the van. Amanda jerked her head around, eyes wide, straining to see, but the dark revealed nothing. Yet something felt wrong. Something moved, or crawled, or crept closer from the black. The air pressed in, tighter, hotter, colder all at once. Goosebumps rose like static across her skin. Amanda clutched her arms to her chest, her fingers digging in so hard they left red marks. And then, in the pit of her mind, a voice spoke. Her own voice, yet distant, echoing like it had traveled up from the bottom of a deep, empty well. No one knows I'm here. No one will find me. No one can save me. Panic surged like a tidal wave breaking loose. Amanda gasped, fumbling in the dark. Her hands brushed against something rough and cold, metal. The van wall. She pounded on it with her fists, again and again. Thud! 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 Is anyone there? Please, she pleaded, her voice no louder than a whisper lost in a storm. But there was no answer, only the whistle of wind slipping through the doorframe, and the sharp metallic click of a second lock sliding into place outside. Then silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of emptiness, of something lifeless. The only sound left was the thunder of Amanda's heartbeat, so loud she could hear it pulse behind her eyes, feel it echo through her bones. She curled in on herself, like a fallen leaf tossed into the heart of a storm. And in that moment, her world shattered, quietly, completely. Everything she knew, everything she loved, everything she believed in, her mother, her father, the little white house, the colored pencils, and the purple butterfly, was swallowed up by the darkness of this steel box. At that very moment, back in the park, Amanda's mother, Emily Miller, lifted her eyes from the half-read book in her lap. Almost by instinct, she glanced over to where Amanda had been sitting, an empty bench. No sign of her daughter. At first, she thought Amanda had simply wandered off somewhere nearby, as she often did. Amanda? She called softly, her voice still calm. No answer. She stood, scanning the area. The trees rustled gently overhead. The lake lay still. A few children played in the distance, and some adults strolled by, unbothered. Amanda! She called again, louder this time. Her voice trembled slightly. Still nothing. A cold vacancy began to bloom in her chest. She stepped quickly around the bench, eyes darting toward the narrow paths lined with flower beds, behind tree trunks, anywhere her daughter might have run to. But Amanda was nowhere. A gust of wind blew past, knocking her book from the bench. Its pages fluttered across the path with a dry, whispering sound that scraped at her nerves. "Amanda! Amanda!" Her voice cracked, sharp with panic. She broke into a run, breath short, her eyes wide and frantic. As she passed each stranger, she pleaded, "Excuse me, have you seen a little girl? Brown hair, yellow dress? She was just sitting right here. My sister, no, my daughter. She was right here just a moment ago." A woman shook her head with a look of concern. An old man furrowed his brow and said he hadn't noticed anything. No one had seen. No one knew. Amanda had vanished, like a breath in the wind. Then Emily stopped cold. Near the path leading to the back exit of the park, beneath the shade of a tree, a single shoe. Small. Pink. Amanda's. It lay on its side, clean and untouched, as if it had slipped off during a hurried tug, left behind in someone's rush to take her. Emily bent down and picked it up slowly. Her hands, slick with sweat, trembled against the chill that ran the length of her spine. She stood frozen. Fear pierced her like a blade of ice through the heart. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She turned and ran. Ran with wild, stumbling steps toward the park gate, grabbing the first security guard she saw and yelling with everything she had, "Call the police! Call the police! My daughter's been taken!" The vehicle came to a halt after a long, jarring ride down a winding dirt road. No more honking horns, no rooftops in sight, only dense forests and cold, colorless mist that swallowed the world whole. Lucas opened the back of the van. A thin beam of early morning light filtered through the fog, landing directly on Amanda's pale, frightened face. She squinted, trembling. The world around her was foreign, thick with the scent of damp earth and the eerie, rhythmic chorus of insects, buzzing like an audience to some dark ritual. She shrank back, curling into herself, arms wrapped tightly around her shins, clinging to the last thread of familiarity. Lucas said nothing. He simply reached in and yanked her by the wrist. She resisted, but the strength of a 5-year-old was like a wisp of thread in the grip of a grown man. Her heels scraped against the forest floor, dragged through tangled roots and sharp pebbles. Then, emerging from the wall of trees, a wooden cabin came into view. Small, rotting, leaning to one side, as if collapsing under the weight of its own misery. Its roof was patched with rusted tin sheets, walls flaking and splintered, stripped of paint. A single window sat sealed behind a grid of rusted iron bars and mesh wire. Lucas led Amanda to the back door. He unlatched a massive padlock, then pulled the iron door open with a long, metallic screech that sounded like claws dragging across a soul. Inside, the darkness swallowed everything. Only a sliver of light crept in through a broken tile in the roof. The air was damp and bitter, thick with the stench of rodent droppings, mildew, and the faint copper tang of old blood. In one corner, 3 small figures huddled together, like injured stray cats seeking warmth. A boy, maybe 9, thin to the bone, his hair clumped and greasy from sweat and filth. A girl, about 7, clutching the shell of a tattered blanket, her eyes bruised and hollow, her expression blank and brittle as though she'd forgotten what trust was. And one older child, perhaps 10, stood against the wall, arms crossed tightly across their chest, eyes hard and alert like a wild animal. They said nothing when Lucas entered. No questions, no protests, no cries. They had already learned, after too many screams, too many blows, that silence was safer. Lucas shoved Amanda inside, like tossing another parcel into storage. "Stay there," he muttered, his voice low and dry as dust. The iron door slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked into place, and once again, the darkness swallowed everything whole. Amanda stood frozen for 3 seconds, then screamed as if something had been torn straight from her soul. "Let me go! Let me out! I want my mom! Mommy! Mommy, come get me! I'm here! I'm right here!" She threw herself at the door, pounding it with her fists, kicking the walls, shouting until her throat turned raw and her voice cracked into sobs. Across the room, the 7-year-old girl lifted her head briefly to glance at Amanda. Her eyes were empty, like a bowl that had sat dry for too long. Then she looked down again, as if the arrival of another child was nothing new, just another piece of the same quiet horror. She rubbed a strip of torn fabric between her fingers, winding it around and around, soothing herself with the comfort of an old habit. In the corner, the 9-year-old boy was peeling small bits of cardboard off a worn box. He cast a quick glance at Amanda, then turned away just as fast, muttering something under his breath, like he feared that even eye contact could bring trouble. "Shh, don't cry, don't make noise." His whisper was soft, uncertain. It was unclear whether he was trying to comfort Amanda or remind himself. The third child, a boy of about 10, was the only one standing tall. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly across his chest. His eyes were sharp, polished like stones worn smooth by rain. He stared at Amanda with no sympathy, no confusion, just a cold, calculating assessment. "You're new," he said. His voice was older than his years, dry, raspy with thirst. Amanda didn't answer. "You'd better stop yelling. No one hears you here. The only thing it does is make him angry, and when he's angry, someone gets hurt." No one came to her. No one reached out. No hugs, no soothing words. These children had already learned how to survive. Stay quiet, stay small, stay out of the way. And Amanda, though she could not yet name it, felt that truth settle into her bones, heavy and cold, in the silence that followed. Each look said the same thing. "You're one of us now, and no one is coming." Her cries faded, softening into broken hiccups that scraped through her parched throat. And then fear began to turn into something heavier than tears: paralysis. Amanda stood motionless, her eyes unblinking. In that moment, the world vanished around her. There were no more forest sounds, no breeze, no voice of her mother, no voice of her father, only the dark room, and 3 silent figures, still as wooden statues. She didn't cry. She didn't scream, not because she was brave, but because the fear had grown too vast, too dense for tears to carry. Her body turned cold, not from the air, but from a shiver that began in the spine and crept slowly up the back of her neck, then slithered into her chest like a venomous snake curling tightly around her heart. She shrank into herself, pressing her back against the damp wooden wall, clutching at her thin cotton dress like she might somehow pull it over herself and disappear inside, like a cocoon. "Where am I? Am I dreaming? Mommy, where are you? I've been good. I promise. I won't lie anymore. Please, come get me. Thoughts spun through her mind like a top wound too tight, whirling, whirling, refusing to stop, until nausea bloomed at the base of her throat. A single drop of water fell from the ceiling and landed on her hand. Cold, wet, like a fingertip from the dark itself. She flinched and pulled her hand to her chest. The other flew to her mouth, covering it as if to trap any sound that might escape. Any noise, she feared, might bring him back. The smell in the room was like that of an abandoned storage closet behind her old kindergarten, a place the teacher once threatened to lock them in if they misbehaved. Amanda had laughed then, thinking it was just a joke. But this was no joke. There was no cheerful voice saying, "Time's up, let's go outside and play." There was only silence. A thick, swallowing silence, so heavy it seemed it could devour even her last breath. Amanda curled in on herself like a fallen leaf, folding into a tight ball on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees. Her wide eyes stared into the dark, but in her gaze now, there was nothing left to see. That room had no sense of day. No windows, no sunlight. The only light came from a narrow gap in the rotting roof tiles, just a sliver of pale, leftover daylight, like a memory from a world the children had been exiled from. The first day, or perhaps it was night, passed without Amanda knowing. There was no clock, no bells, just hunger, cold, and the sound of her own heartbeat thudding in her chest. Mealtime arrived when the door creaked open for the first time. The man shoved in a crumpled cardboard box containing only a chunk of bread, hard and dry as old wood. No one fought. No one spoke. The oldest boy, perhaps 10, the one with eyes like carved stone, stepped forward and began dividing the food with his hands. No discussion. His fingers trembled slightly, but his face remained blank, expressionless like a shovel digging sand. "One piece," he murmured, handing the smallest sliver, no bigger than a pinky finger, to the younger girl with tangled hair. "One piece," he said again, passing the next to the other boy. The final scrap, barely a crust, he turned toward Amanda. Amanda reached out, her hand shaking, ice cold, but her eyes never left the bread. "Take it, now," the boy muttered, not angry, just tired, as if frustrated by having to explain the obvious. "If he comes back and we haven't divided it, we get nothing." Amanda took it. Her fingers were dirty, frozen, but she didn't eat right away. The bread felt heavy in her hand, like a stone. She wasn't sure whether to eat it or keep it, like something to hold on to. The water was worse. There was only a rusted spout, which hissed to life whenever the engine outside sputtered on. His pump. During those fleeting minutes, the children scrambled to catch the water in bottle caps, plastic lids, or cupped palms. When Amanda first stepped forward, the 9-year-old boy yanked her back hard. "Not your turn," he growled, eyes bloodshot, either from fear or sleeplessness. "He sets the times. Drink outside your turn and you get beaten. I know. It happened to me." Amanda backed away, her heart pounding. For the first time, she understood. There were no friends here. Only the law of silence and survival. In that darkness, time no longer flowed. It stretched, became long, heavy spaces between sounds. The clink of a lock meant terror. Footsteps meant danger. The clash of metal meant punishment. Amanda began to react like a small animal. At the first sound of footsteps, she would shrink into herself, hold her breath, her heartbeat thrashing like a caged bird under a heavy cloth. One day, Amanda quietly asked, "What day is it today?" The girl with tangled hair just looked at her, then shook her head, not because she didn't want to answer, but because she no longer remembered. "There are no days here," said the older boy flatly, wiping mud from the corner of the wall. "Just when the door opens and when it doesn't." Amanda began to feel her mother's face fading in her mind, like a painting slowly veiled in fog. Her father's laughter was no longer a sound, but a faint echo, distant and formless. Everything was slipping from memory, replaced by the stench of mold, the constant darkness, and the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. One night, curled up against the wall, Amanda found herself wondering, if I forget what my mother looks like, will she forget me too? The air in the wooden shack grew heavier with each passing day, as if fear itself was filling the room, leaving no space to breathe. There was no laughter, no conversations, only the wind sneaking through cracked planks, the faint scratching of fingernails against wood, and the growl of empty stomachs echoing in silence. One morning, the door burst open. Light slashed into the dark like a blade. "You, out here." The man's voice cracked through the air like thunder. The children flinched. No one moved. Lucas pointed at the girl with the tangled hair. She hesitated, clutching her scrap of fabric tightly, eyes rising, not toward him, but toward some imagined sky beyond the wooden walls. "Move." His voice darkened, his boots slamming against the floor. She stood, trembling, her knees knocked together. Her wide eyes didn't dare spill tears. He grabbed her wrist and yanked, hard, like tearing paper, and dragged her out. The door slammed shut behind them. The darkness returned. But this time, it wasn't silent. It hissed, thick and alive, like it was swallowing the room whole. Half an hour later, the door opened again. Amanda held her breath as the girl was thrown back in like something discarded. She hit the floor hard. Her shoulders shook, but she didn't cry. Her face was swollen. A bruise curved along her cheek and neck like a shadow. No one asked anything. No one moved closer. Lucas stood in the doorway, voice colder than the sliver of light behind him. "Disobey, and this will happen to you." The door slammed shut again, and silence fell. Not the peace of quiet, but a void drained of all sound, all breath. Another night. Silence so thick it pressed into their bones. Only the wind hissed through the rusted roof and the ragged breathing of starving children. Amanda lay curled up against the wall. Her throat burned, her eyes were dry and wide. A small sob slipped out, barely a sound, more like a breath that tripped. But it was enough. The door burst open with a crash. There she stood, the woman who kept watch, in crumpled pajamas, hair a tangled mess, eyes red-shot with sleep. "Who's crying?" she snarled, half growl, half yawn. Her flashlight swept the room like a blade. "You, huh? You little brat," she roared when the beam caught Amanda's tear-streaked face. She stomped forward, yanked Amanda up by the hair. "You woke me up. Want to sleep outside with the wild dogs? Is that it?" A slap cracked across Amanda's cheek, snapping her head to the side. She didn't scream, didn't fight. She just panted, sharp and quick, like a rabbit caught in a trap. Amanda didn't remember when the woman left, just that after that night, she never cried again. From then on, she sealed everything inside. No talking, no questions, no lingering looks. She learned to sit still like a shadow, eyes wide in the dark, but seeing nothing anymore. Even the bread, however small, she divided in 3. 1 bite for morning, 1 for afternoon, 1 in case he forgets. When the water trickled from the pipe, she didn't rush. She waited to be called. Amanda had learned, if you're not quiet, you don't survive. If you're not still, you will be hurt. And so she became something else, not a child anymore, a shadow. She ate, she shivered, she waited. One afternoon, the door burst open without warning. The rusted hinges screamed, slicing through the air like a cold blade, cutting straight into the hearts of the children. Lucas stepped inside. Quietly, no shouting, no threats. He didn't need to. One glance from him, and the 3 children instinctively bowed their heads. He walked forward, hands in his pockets, and stopped in front of the 9-year-old boy, the one who always muttered to himself, who sat, peeling bits of cardboard from an old box as if trying to build an escape from scraps. No one knew his name. No one dared ask. Lucas said nothing. He simply grabbed the boy by the collar and lifted him up, calm, almost casual, in a way that chilled the blood. Come. 1 word, but it fell like a hammer. The boy didn't resist, didn't beg. He only turned his head to look back at the others. His eyes in that fleeting moment tried to memorize every face, every breath, like someone imprinting the last fragments of a world before vanishing from it. Amanda sat pressed against the wall, fists clenched around her shirt. His gaze met hers for 1 second, a brief connection, but as deep and silent as the bottom of a well. A chill slithered down her spine. A thought flickered, uninvited and terrifying. If someone is taken like that, do they ever come back? The door slammed shut. Silence wrapped the room again, like a shroud. The remaining children stayed frozen, curled into themselves. No one cried. No one made a sound, as if even the smallest movement might mark them as next. Amanda didn't cry. She didn't dare let out even a whisper of breath. She just sat there, eyes wide, lips cracked and dry, limbs locked in place. In her mind, she counted again. 4, then 3, still 3. The blanket was still there. The spot on the floor was still warm, but the boy was gone. Lucas never spoke of him again, and none of them dared ask. 1 day passed, then 2, then many more. He didn't return. No sound came from outside, only the wind howling through the rotting gaps in the door. Every time the door creaked, their hearts stopped. And every nightfall, they counted silently, wondering if they would all still be there come morning. And for the first time, Amanda couldn't fall asleep. Not because of the cold, not because of hunger, but because she was afraid that if she closed her eyes, she might wake up to find she was the only one left. Morning, or perhaps afternoon. In a room without sunlight, time had melted into something formless, like mist. The 10-year-old boy sat with his back against the wall, eyes narrowed, peering through a narrow slit between 2 rotting wooden boards. A thread of light slipped through, thin as spider silk, crawling across his cheek before dissolving into the musty air. Amanda sat opposite, motionless as a shadow. She made no sound, did not cry, did not whimper, but her eyes, always wide, never stopped watching. Every creak, every rustle of the door, her gaze followed, alert and unblinking. Every time footsteps echoed from the yard outside, Amanda would shrink into herself, biting her lip, arms wrapped tightly around her knees, as though trying to make her body small enough to vanish. The boy saw all of it, and he understood. Then, without warning, the door screeched open, the metal scraping the floor like a blade. A filthy sack was thrown in, landing with a dull thud in the center of the room. "Bread!" the man barked, and the door slammed shut again. The three children moved at once, not scrambling, not fighting, but like ghosts drifting toward what was theirs. Hunger was a constant here, but so was fear. The time for chaos had long passed. Amanda reached for a crust of bread, just brushed it, when Luna, by accident, knocked her hand away. I'm sorry," Luna murmured, but her fingers had already drawn back protectively around her piece. Every gesture here was quick, frightened, half-conscious. Amanda said nothing. She only pulled her hand back and sat down, as if she no longer believed she had the right to ask. The boy saw all of it, and he understood. Then, without warning, the door screeched open, the metal scraping the floor like a blade. A filthy sack was thrown in, landing with a dull thud in the center of the room. "Bread!" the man barked, and the door slammed shut again. The three children moved at once, not scrambling, not fighting, but like ghosts drifting toward what was theirs. Hunger was a constant here, but so was fear. The time for chaos had long passed. Amanda reached for a crust of bread, just brushed it, when Luna, by accident, knocked her hand away. I'm sorry," Luna murmured, but her fingers had already drawn back protectively around her piece. Every gesture here was quick, frightened, half-conscious. Amanda said nothing. She only pulled her hand back and sat down, as if she no longer believed she had the right to ask. The boy saw all of it, and he understood. He picked up a half piece, the edge tinged faintly with mold, and broke it cleanly in two. He kept one half. The other he reached out and offered to Amanda. "Take it." His voice was dry, but not unkind. Amanda looked up. Her eyes widened as if she couldn't quite believe it. "You're not going to eat it?" "Half is enough. Around here, eating more doesn't make you full for longer." Amanda reached out, slowly, carefully, as if moving too fast would cause the bread to disappear. Her fingertips touched the crust, engrazed his. A touch so soft it might have gone unnoticed in another world, but in this place, choked with shadows and silence, it rang out like the first note of a long-forgotten song. She lowered her head, whispering, "Thank you." No one said anything after that, but the boy noticed, for the first time in what felt like forever, Amanda's eyes weren't completely hollow anymore. There was a flicker there, faint, fragile, like diamond dust caught in the last light of dusk. Something had stirred, something impossibly small, but real. And in this endless night, something had just begun to glow. Late at night, no one knew the hour. In that suffocating, ink-thick darkness, time felt like a pit of mud, slow, heavy, inescapable. From the room outside came the ragged, grating snore of the woman who kept watch, steady and labored, like the groaning of a beast in drunken slumber. There were no rats tonight, no rain tapping the roof, only silence. A silence so dense, it pressed down on their chests like stone. Amanda lay curled in the corner, her cheek pressed against the damp, cold plank wall. She couldn't sleep. Though her eyes ached with exhaustion, her mind kept playing old sounds, her mother's voice calling her name, her father's booming laugh, the slam of the car door, the dragging footsteps of Lucas. They tangled in her head, sharp, chaotic, and unwilling to fade. A sound, faint, almost nothing, like fabric shifting. Amanda jolted, her body tightening into itself. Then a whisper, soft as a whisper from the wind itself, brushing her ear. "Don't be scared. She's sleeping deep." Luna. The girl was close now, her wide eyes open in the dark. A thread of light seeped through the cracked tiles above, just enough to catch the ridge of her nose and the shadowed hollows under her eyes. Amanda stared, frozen, unmoving. "I'm Luna," the girl said quietly. "I was taken after school. Walking home, someone asked for directions. And then I don't remember anything." Her voice was even, calm, like someone used to speaking without expecting a reply. She didn't ask questions. She didn't push. Amanda shifted slightly. Her chin trembled, but her lips stayed sealed. Luna went on, her voice as soft as sea foam brushing an empty shell. "I've been here a long time. I don't remember how long. I miss home. I miss my mom and dad." She dropped her gaze. Her fingers twisted the fraying edge of her shirt, absent and instinctive. Between them, a stillness. A silence not of fear, but of knowing. Then slowly, so slowly, Amanda nodded. Just once. Small, almost imperceptible, but enough. Luna said nothing more. She simply stayed. A little closer now. Not touching, not intruding. Just there. A quiet presence. A second shadow in the dark, letting her know she was not entirely alone. In the damp, fear-thick darkness, something small began to take root. Not hope, but connection. Frail, yes, yet stronger than fear. It was the 10-year-old boy who thought of it first. One day, sitting with his back to the wall, he tapped the floor lightly, tap, tap, with his fingernail. Amanda looked up. Luna frowned, curious. Another time, when the guardwoman had dozed off, he tapped again. Tap, 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 and met Amanda's eyes. The message was clear. It's safe. Gradually, those tiny sounds became a secret language among the three. 1 tap is danger, 2 taps is safe, 3 taps is wait for the signal. One day, Amanda pulled a loose thread from her torn sleeve. She tied a knot in it, small, deliberate, and gently placed it on Luna's knee. Luna looked down. She understood instantly. "I'm here with you." She didn't speak, just nodded. They began to invent signs, scraps of cloth, bits of paper, faint scratches on the wooden floor. Things meaningless to any adult, but to the children, they were a code. They sent messages through glances, gestures, slight tilts of the head, or a single drawn-out breath. One night, Luna trembled in her sleep, a soft whimper escaping her lips. Amanda didn't touch her. She knew even kindness could startle her. But she slipped a frayed strip of cloth, tied in a tiny knot, into Luna's hand. The 10-year-old, still facing the wall as always, tapped the floor. Tap, tap, tap. And Amanda tapped back. Tap. And then silence. But this was not the silence of loneliness. It was a silence shared, witnessed, no longer alone. They no longer spoke of home. No one asked, "Do you miss your mom?" No names were spoken aloud. But sometimes a look was enough. A silent message passed between frightened eyes. "I know. Me too. We still have each other." Since discovering how to speak without speaking, through taps, threads, glances, something had changed. They were no longer just silent shadows, quietly enduring. And through the thick, murky dark, a faint light began to flicker. The 10-year-old boy saw it, and he decided to try something bolder. To observe, to calculate, to wait. At first, he simply stayed still, always the one sitting closest to the wall, eyes half-lidded, as if uninterested in anything. But in truth, he was watching. Every detail, every footstep, every breath in the dark. The woman who guarded the door had habits, though she didn't know it. Around midnight, she would go behind the derelict house, where an old metal barrel sat. The lid creaked open with a clank, and she'd light a cigarette, followed by a raspy cough. That cough always came in twos, no more than a minute apart. In the early dawn, when the fog hung thick like smoke, she would make a slow lap around the house, flashlight in hand, its dim beam flickering like a dying firefly. Every heavy footstep made the wood beneath her groan. But the boy noticed something else. She always paused in front of the door, twisted the padlock, and click. A single, dry, sharp sound, like a cat's claw against rusted metal. He realized something. One sharp click meant the door was now locked. Two rapid clicks meant it was about to open. Each time he heard that double click, he pulled the others into the deepest shadow of the room, not out of fear, but because the dark lets you see more clearly than the light when you're not trying to be seen. From then on, every time the lock clicked, he looked up, his eyes steady, not startled, not panicked, but listening like he was writing it all down in his mind. This hour, unlocked. That hour, locked. Her steps drag when she's tired, pound heavier when she's angry. He said nothing to Luna or Amanda, not yet. But behind his quiet eyes, signals were falling into place like puzzle pieces. He wasn't drawing a map on paper. He was mapping an escape route inside his mind. One afternoon, just as the light leaking through the cracked roof turned into a thin strip of gray, like smoke barely clinging to air, the door creaked open. Lucas growled, "Get out here!" All three children looked up, but no one moved. The air in the room froze. "You, boy, come here!" The 10-year-old's eyes darkened. He rose slowly, walked toward the door without hesitation. No protest, no retreat. But beneath the sleeve of his tattered shirt, his hand curled into a small, clenched fist. As he stepped out, Lucas gripped his shoulder and yanked him forward. The door swung wide behind them, and cold light spilled through, striking the old iron hinge. The boy saw it tremble. A rivet was nearly dislodged. held together by rust and rot. He didn't blink. He remembered. Lucas didn't hit him. He ordered him to take out the trash, stack firewood, carry a few things from one side of the yard to the other. And while the boy obeyed, his eyes never rested. Every moment outside was another piece of the puzzle. Every crack in the wall, every creak in the floorboard, every footstep Lucas took. On the way back in, the boy deliberately tripped over a warped floor slat. Lucas instinctively let go. The boy hit the ground hard, his hand quickly sweeping across the dirt, and there it was. A jagged piece of metal, no longer than a broken fingernail, buried at the base of the threshold. Lucas barked, "Watch where you're going!" "Sorry, my foot," the boy muttered, already tucking the shard into the hem of his shirt. As he was shoved back into the room, his eyes met Amanda's. Only for a split second, but enough. Enough for her to understand. He was hiding something, a secret, a spark of hope. He returned to his corner, the shard nestled in his sleeve like a buried ember. No one asked, but Luna looked at him a little longer than usual, and Amanda, though she didn't dare meet his gaze, felt it too. Something had changed. From that day on, every glance exchanged between the three children no longer whispered fear. It said something else, something fragile but alive. We could try. We could do something. No one dared say it aloud, but deep inside, a new thought had been planted, that this room, that lock, this silence were not forever. By day, they were still quiet, still three small shadows huddled inside a yellowed, damp-walled room. But at night, when the guard-woman's snores rumbled like a slow, dull drum, they began to play a new game, hide and seek, in their minds. At first, it was clumsy. Fear made everything difficult. They didn't dare speak. They scratched ideas into the dusty floor with fingers and shards. Simple marks, a line, an arrow, a plan. Gradually, they grew in sync. No words needed, just a glance, a tap, a nod, a fingertip sketch across dirt-streaked wood. One night, the 10-year-old boy took a stub of charcoal and drew 3 dots on the ground, each one representing one of them. He circled a dot, then drew a line stretching to the door, then pointed to himself. Luna understood instantly. "I'll open the door." She nodded once, then pointed to her eyes and then the crack in the wall where slivers of outside light sometimes crept through. She would be their lookout. Amanda trembled, but only for a moment. Then she pointed to the small stone Luna often used to tap signals. She would be the diversion. Tap at just the right moment to cover their sound. No words, but in that silence, 3 minds moved like pieces on a chessboard. Another night, the boy mimed gripping an invisible lock. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if truly turning a key. Then he paused, raised 3 fingers, looked at the girls. Luna nodded. "If it opens, we have 3 seconds." Amanda closed her eyes, counting silently with her fingers on her knee. 1, 2, 3. No voice was heard, but the game replayed in their heads every night. And each night it grew sharper, clearer, tighter. In a room no wider than 2 outstretched arms, 3 small minds were laying plans like soldiers, without orders, without words, but with one understanding. This time, there can't be a mistake. A game where no one laughs, where no one loses. And if they win freedom. And in that imagined escape, Amanda felt something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. She wasn't useless. She had a role, a mission. She didn't need to shout or scream, just a single, well-timed knock, a glance, and she could save them all. Imagination became hope. Hope became a plan. And that plan, no matter how fragile, was the only thing keeping them standing, day after day. One stormy night, the rain had begun in the afternoon, a soft patter on the roof, gentle and harmless. But by nightfall, it had become a tempest. It drummed against the corrugated metal roof like thousands of hands slapping down in unison, drowning out every other sound. The wind howled through the cracks in the door, shrieking in sharp gusts as if the entire forest outside were wailing in rage. In the thick, clinging dark, the three children lay curled tightly in their corners, eyes wide open, silent. None of them slept. Each time lightning flashed through the broken slats above, their faces flickered like ghostly silhouettes, pale, uncertain, flickering in and out of existence. Then something shifted. Kurt, Kurt. The 10-year-old boy sat up, slowly, tilting his head toward the sound. It was the back hinge. Faint, almost hidden beneath the roar of the storm, but not the usual creak. This time, it was softer, unstable. The rust had deepened. The joint had weakened. Outside, a rough chuckle floated in through the wind. A man's voice, slurred. Then the harsh, senseless babble of the guardwoman, loud and careless. The sharp sting of alcohol seeped through the cracks in the door, mixing with the stench of damp wood and rot like a strange omen. They were drunk. Luna opened her eyes and looked at the boy. No signal was needed. She knew. Amanda tightened her grip around the small stone in her palm, holding her breath. The boy slithered across the floor, each movement as fluid and quiet as the shadows themselves. He pressed his ear against the back door. The sound of metal, brittle, fatigued, whispered back. It was ready. One more push, and it would give. He turned, signaled. Fink, qui. 3 fingers, all 3. 1 dash. Ready. A wave, the moment is near. Luna nodded, pointing toward the crack in the wall. Amanda blinked twice, the signal for understood. They waited, still, listening. Their bodies mimicked sleep, but their hearts no longer followed time. They beat to the rhythm of the wind, of the thunder, of each sudden snore from the other room. And in that moment, every breath became a countdown. The night rain poured down in torrents, drumming relentlessly against the rusted metal roof, drowning out every other sound. In the far corner of the room, the 10-year-old boy lay on his side, eyes wide open, unblinking. He listened to the heavy, uneven breaths coming from the next room, the sounds of adults drunk and deep in slumber. This was the moment they had waited for, a chance they could not afford to miss. No words, no touch. Luna turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. A small nod. Just as they had agreed, Amanda slipped from her corner, crawling across the cold floor, her hand clenched tightly around the small stone she always carried. 3 children, 3 directions, moving like shadows in the dark. The boy crept to the back door, the one with the loose hinge they had been watching for days. From the hem of his shirt, he pulled out a thin shard of metal, hidden carefully. His fingers, wet from the rain leaking through the roof, gripped the improvised pick and began working it into the rusted lock. The storm masked the faint scraping of metal on metal. Luna took position by the narrow crack in the wall, the one that gave a sliver of view into the guard's room. She stared without blinking, heart pounding. ready to signal at the slightest shadow. Amanda stayed several feet behind the boy, crouched on her heels, trembling hands wrapped around the stone, eyes fixed on him. Her role? To create a diversion if needed. 3 quick taps on the wall to cause a distraction, giving the boy time to retreat. Every child was taut as a drawn bowstring. A soft click echoed from the lock. The boy froze. His heart caught in his throat. Luna turned. Nothing. She shook her head slightly. He continued. A raindrop from a leak above fell onto Amanda's neck. She didn't move. Every motion, every breath was part of a silent symphony. A symphony of survival, where each child was an instrument and only perfect harmony could lead them to freedom. The rain kept falling, unrelenting. The room remained cloaked in darkness. Kneeling at the back door, the boy's hands were soaked and cold. The metal shard trembled between his fingers as he twisted, angled, wedged. A few soft clicks, encouraging, but the lock still refused to budge. He bit his lip, tilted his head back, and exhaled quietly through his nose. Not enough pressure. Maybe the technique was wrong. Or perhaps the lock had long since rusted into a lifeless block of metal. Across the room, Luna was still on watch. Amanda, still ready. They were all waiting, but they couldn't return with nothing. He scanned the room, and then, suddenly, his eyes locked onto the door hinge, the rivet, the one he'd noticed before, now barely hanging on. No words, no signal. He abandoned the lock, slid silently toward the door's edge. In the flickering light from a lightning flash leaking through the roof, he slipped the metal shard into the hinge, not to turn this time, but to pry. His teeth clenched so tight they drew blood. His hands were small, weak, but determined. With each twist, each shift of the wrist, the hinge groaned softly, half swallowed by the storm outside, half carried into the pounding hearts of the 3 children inside. Amanda tightened her grip on the stone. Luna turned to look. The boy gave the smallest nod. And then, ping, the rivet popped free. It hit the floor with a sound like a bell, a thin, fragile note of freedom. The door trembled, not wide open, but just enough for a child to slip through. He turned, locking eyes with the others. No voice, just a look. But in that look, go. The cracked door stood ajar, part invitation, part trap. They paused, just a breath. And then Luna moved first. Her body curled low. She slid through the gap between door and wall, smooth and silent as shadow. The boy motioned to Amanda. She crept forward, hesitating only when her fingers touched the icy metal of the loosened hinge. Her sleeve brushed rust, leaving a streak that looked like blood across the fabric. But she didn't flinch, didn't cry. Amanda slipped through. Now, only the boy remained. He glanced back one last time. At the room. The decaying nest of nightmares where they had once curled up like ghosts of children. Then he pushed the door, and the hinge shrieked. A long, high-pitched wail, piercing through the rain like a blade. Luna and Amanda froze. Inside, a crash, a bottle hitting the ground, a slurred voice, thick with sleep and drink. Was that someone? No more time. The boy lunged through the gap, shoulder slamming into the frame. The door flew open, smacking the wall with a thunderous crack, like a war cry in the night. Run! He didn't whisper. He didn't hide. Amanda grabbed Amanda's hand. Together, all three tore across the backyard. Mud slipped underfoot. Rocks sliced their heels. But no one stopped. Dogs barked in the distance. Another door banged open behind them. And then, they're escaping. Lights, move. Lucas, roaring. No looking back. No slowing down. Three small shadows plunged into the forest. The rain masked their footsteps, masked even the thunder of their hearts. Branches slashed their faces. The scent of wet leaves, of mud, of fear, all fused into one. Amanda stumbled, nearly fell. The boy reached back, grabbed her hand, yanked her upright. His eyes no longer held panic, only fire. Don't look back, just run. The voices behind them grew louder. But the paths through the woods, unfamiliar to drunken grown-ups, were known to children who had spent too many nights studying them. Every branch above them stole another beam of light. Every heartbeat, another step forward. Every second, another breath closer to freedom. The forest at night was nothing like anything Amanda had ever known. It wasn't the forest from storybooks or the one in her crayon sketches with sunlight spilling through fairy tale leaves. This was a maze, cold, wet, and breathing. Every sound rang sharp, as if echoing through a cave. Luna was panting beside her, still gripping Amanda's hand tightly. The boy ran ahead, silent, pausing only now and then to listen. The rustle of leaves, the snap of a branch, a footstep too heavy to belong to any of them. A beam of light sliced through the treetops, sharp, sudden, like lightning. Lucas was close, too close. "You can't run from me, I see you." A voice, raw and furious. Dogs barking, branches cracking. Someone stumbling behind them. The children dove beneath a low canopy of branches, their backs pressed to the ground. Luna and Amanda crouched together, trembling. The boy stretched out in front of them, shielding their bodies with his own. Lucas stormed past. His flashlight swung wide, too far left. He didn't see them. But the dog did. A snarl ripped through the dark like a blade. Barking, closer now. "Here, I heard that." No more time. The boy sprang up, grabbing a heavy branch nearby. "Run the other way. Take Amanda, now." "What about you?" Luna's voice cracked. "Go. I'll lead them away." He didn't wait for agreement. He hurled the branch into the woods. Crack. Loud enough to draw attention. The dog bolted after the sound. The boy tore off to the right, crashing through the underbrush, dragging chaos behind him. Luna pulled Amanda and bolted in the opposite direction. Mud soaked through their sleeves, knees bruised. But they didn't cry. They didn't scream. Their fear was buried deep, choking in their throats. Time passed. How much, they couldn't tell. Hidden behind a thorny bush, Luna still held Amanda's hand. Both their chests rose and fell too fast. The boy was gone. Then, thudding footsteps. A scuffle. A strangled yell in the dark. "No! Let go! Run!" It was his voice. A loud crash. Then Silence. Amanda clamped a hand over her mouth. Luna trembled, eyes wide. The forest fell quiet again. Not peaceful, but hollow, like something had been stolen from it. No one spoke. No one cried. He was gone. Taken. Maybe alive. Maybe not. But they couldn't go back. They couldn't help him. Luna bowed her head for a long time. Then she whispered, "We have to keep going." Amanda nodded. She didn't believe her legs would move, but somehow they did. Two small shadows slipped deeper into the woods, where only the wind through dry branches and the silence of grief followed them. Night in the forest. The rain hadn't stopped. The ground was slick with mud, treacherous beneath bare feet. Branches lashed at exposed skin like whips. Amanda and Luna ran without speaking, their breath ragged, tangled with the pounding of their hearts, a frantic rhythm like war drums in their ears. Mud splattered their faces, soaked their clothes, until fabric clung like a second skin, heavy and cold. A fallen branch blocked the path. Luna scrambled over first, Amanda following close behind. Her hand slipped. Luna turned, grabbed Amanda's wrist, and hauled her up with every ounce of strength a child surviving on sheer will could muster. Behind them, movement. "Stop right there!" The woman's voice echoed behind them, hoarse and furious. "Hurry!" Luna's whisper broke, brittle with panic. They veered onto a steep trail, the earth slick like wet clay. Amanda lost her footing. The world tilted. "Amanda!" Luna's cry was sharp, strangled by urgency. Amanda tumbled, her body scraping over roots and rocks. Her fingers clawed at grass and tangled roots, but they slipped through her grasp. A branch lashed across her face. Rain filled her mouth, bitter and cold. She finally came to a stop beneath a massive tree, dazed and bruised. At the top of the slope, Luna crouched, hands shaking, ready to climb down. And then a rough hand seized her collar. "Got you now, you little brat!" The woman's voice was venom, thick with fury. Luna kicked, thrashed, refusing to scream. Her eyes searched downward, found Amanda. For one brief second, through the rain, their eyes met. No words, no cries, just a look. Then Luna was dragged backward, her feet leaving long, desperate streaks in the mud. Amanda trembled, crawling into a dense thicket, willing herself invisible. She held her breath, heart clenched tight in her chest like a stone. Footsteps squelched closer. Leaves rustled. Wind hissed low through the trees. "Only one left now," came the woman's breathless voice, raw from shouting. "Keep looking. She can't have gone far." The footsteps faded. Away. In the wrong direction. Amanda didn't move. Not a twitch. Mud and rain covered her face, her chest rising and falling like someone trying to remember how to breathe. No one came back. No one called her name. Silence. She stayed there, curled up tight, until her eyes drifted shut without her knowing it. In that cold, broken sleep, shivering and soaked, Amanda didn't know if she cried. She only knew this. For the first time, she was truly alone. A faint light filtered through the trees. The sky had not yet fully brightened. A thin veil of mist cloaked the forest, damp and cold like a wet cloth pressed to the skin. Amanda opened her eyes. For a long moment, she didn't know where she was. The smell of wet earth, the lonely cry of a bird somewhere high above. Everything felt foreign. And then, like a crashing wave, the memories returned. Luna, the boy, the chase, the capture. She sat up slowly. Her body ached, clothes soaked, skin scraped raw. Mud clung to her hands in thick, dried patches. No voices, no footprints. She was truly alone. Amanda began to walk. Her legs trembled beneath her. Her throat was dry, raw with thirst. Each step through the wet underbrush made her heart pound harder. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stay still. Then, a sound. She froze. A shadow flickered between the trees, low, fast, and not quite human. Amanda staggered back, fear knotting in her chest. The creature stepped from the brush and stopped a few paces away. A dog. Its greatcoat was matted with mud, body lean and strong. Its eyes glinted gold in the dim light, locked onto hers. It didn't growl, didn't bare its teeth. It simply looked. Amanda stood motionless, afraid even to breathe. The dog didn't move. 1 second, 2. Then it barked, low, not aggressive, and turned, trotting away into the trees. Amanda didn't follow, partly from fear, partly from confusion, but the dog didn't vanish. It stopped, looked back at her, barked again, just once, and stamped a paw against the ground, almost as if urging her. Then it turned and moved on. Amanda still didn't move. The wind whispered through the forest, and she shivered. But again, the dog returned, this time closer. Its gaze never left her face. Another bark, another sprint forward. 3 times it came. 3 times it waited. And on the third, Amanda understood. It was waiting for her. It wanted to lead her somewhere. She looked at the dog, then into the deep, endless forest behind her. One direction led back, to chains and shadows. The other, toward a creature that could not speak, but had not left her behind. She drew in a breath, deep. Then slowly, very slowly, she stepped forward. The dog stopped barking. It turned, and this time ran ahead in silence, as if it had finally been assured she would come. And so, in the cold hush of the forest, a child and a nameless dog began a wordless journey, a silent flight from hell, towards something unknown, perhaps survival, perhaps more. The sun had risen high, but the forest remained dim beneath the thick canopy. The air was still damp and cold, remnants of the storm that had passed in the night. Amanda's clothes clung to her like a second skin, still wet, chilled by the morning breeze. Each time she stepped through a patch of deep shade, she shivered uncontrollably. The dog walked ahead, mud splashing up its legs with every step, but its pace was steady, purposeful. Every so often it would glance back at her. Amanda didn't know where they were going, but something in the dog's calm, bright eyes compelled her forward. She had to follow. The ground was slick and soft beneath her. Mud sucked at her feet. She slipped more than once, her small hands scraped raw from grabbing onto roots and branches. Still, she walked. One step, then another. And then, a new sound. Not wind, not birds, but the sharp, rhythmic buzz of a saw. The dog barked once and darted forward, crashing through a stand of trees. Amanda stumbled after it, her breath catching. They broke through a curtain of underbrush, and suddenly the forest opened. A clearing. In its center stood a small wooden cabin, smoke curling gently from the chimney into a pale, ash-gray sky. A man was outside, splitting firewood. He turned the moment the dog came charging into view. "Max? What is it, boy?" The dog barked again, circled back, then barked toward the trees, toward where Amanda stood, half hidden behind the leaves. The man narrowed his eyes, dropped his axe, and moved quickly in their direction. Good Lord! Amanda didn't move. Sunlight spilled through the canopy and lit her face, streaked with mud, pale with exhaustion. Her eyes were wide, wary. Her small body trembled. She stepped half a pace back, fingers gripping the bark of a dry tree behind her. The man, who had been kneeling beside the dog, now stood fully upright. On his shirt was the insignia of the forest rangers. A green hat hung by the cabin door. His dark khaki uniform bore smudges of earth. But nothing about him resembled the gray-clad men who had dragged and beaten and terrified her. Still, Amanda didn't trust him. Not yet. She glanced at the dog. It sat calmly at his side, tail swaying gently. But it did not come closer. The man raised both hands in front of him, slowly, palms open. "It's all right," he said softly. "I'm a ranger. You can trust me. Max brought you here, didn't he?" Amanda said nothing. She looked at the dog, then at the man. There was no threat in his eyes, no scent of danger, only the warm glow of firelight from inside the cabin, and a hand extended toward her, not too close, not forcing. A breeze stirred the branches overhead. Amanda trembled. Her limbs felt hollow, barely holding her up. She gave the tiniest nod, like a rain-heavy leaf before it falls, and collapsed forward. The man rushed forward, catching her in his arms before she hit the ground. "Easy now," he whispered. "You're safe. You're safe." Max the dog sat beside them, still and watchful, his gaze never leaving the girl. Amanda jolted awake to the soft patter of rain still whispering beyond the porch. A nightmare had yanked her back from the darkness, but reality, too, felt strange, unfamiliar. A small wooden room. The faint scent of mint tea and wood smoke hung in the air. The ceiling was low. On the windowsill, the dog, Max, lay still, his head resting on his front paws, ears tilted in her direction. Amanda's breathing came in short gasps. The tears had only just dried. Her body still trembled. A man approached. He wore no military uniform, no black boots, no iron baton. Only a faded green ranger jacket with a patch that read U.S. Forest Service. His face was weathered, sun-browned, with stubble flecked across his jaw. His eyes were not sharp with suspicion, but quiet, tempered by patience learned from long years in the woods. He knelt down, careful to keep his distance. He didn't sit on the bed, didn't reach out. When he spoke, his voice was low, warm, and slow, as if even sound might frighten her. "Sweetheart, you're safe now. My name is Tom. I'm a park ranger." Amanda didn't answer. Her eyes stayed wide, watchful. Her body curled in on itself like something about to be struck. She clutched the hem of her shirt to her chest with both hands. Tom spoke again, his voice softer still. "I won't hurt you. I promise. Can you tell me your name? I just want to call your parents, let them know you're okay." Silence. Max stood, padded quietly over, and lay beside the bed. Amanda didn't pull away, but she didn't reach for him either. Tom tried once more, almost in a whisper. "Do you remember your address? A phone number? Anyone I can call for you?" Still, Amanda said nothing. Her eyes shimmered, then closed. Her head sank to her knees. She wasn't asleep. She was hiding inside herself, inside a space without voices, without crying, without anyone calling her name. Tom sighed. He didn't press her. He set a glass of water on the table. "Drink when you're ready," he said gently. Then he stood and stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind him. Click, a small, simple sound, but to Amanda, it rang out like the bolt of a lock sealing away everything that had come before. She flinched. Her entire body recoiled, instinct overriding thought, ready to be dragged, ready to be hit. She hugged her knees to her chest, her forehead resting on bony arms, eyes fixed on the wooden door. No one entered. No one shouted. No heavy footsteps scraped across the floor. Only silence. Beside her, Max lay motionless. He shifted his head slightly, nudging his nose against the crook of her elbow. His breath was warm, steady, unlike anything Amanda had known before. She didn't push him away. She didn't touch him either, but something inside her eased, just a little. A long moment passed. Then Amanda lifted her head. She glanced around the room, the high wooden beams, the soft amber light, the lingering warmth of tea and a crackling stove. And something broke. She didn't cry out, but the tears came, hot, silent. No one told her to stop. No one scolded her. And for the first time, Amanda cried, in safety. Max didn't move. He only tilted his head, his dark eyes steady and clear, as if to say, "Now you know. You're not alone anymore." On one side, Amanda remained trapped in a nightmare too deep for words. On the other, Emily Miller, her mother, had all but shattered the day her daughter disappeared. That afternoon, when the police arrived, Emily could only clutch the small white shoe Amanda had dropped at the edge of the park, as if holding on to a piece of her child's body. Every question, every formality, became a distant drone in her ears. After interviewing the family and nearby witnesses, the lead investigator returned to examine the park's surveillance footage. A blurry segment emerged from one of the cameras lining the walking path. Children playing in the distance, pedestrians passing by a row of benches, and a little girl in a white dress with purple flowers sitting alone beneath the maple tree, her head bent over a drawing. At the 33rd minute, a man entered the frame. Gray windbreaker, baseball cap pulled low. He passed by like any other stranger, but just a few frames later, he had stopped beside the girl. No sound, no clearly suspicious movement. She looked up, her pencil paused. He crouched, said something, offered her something small, maybe candy. The frame shook slightly as wind brushed the lens. Branches swayed, the light dimmed. Then, suddenly, the girl flinched backward. Too late. The man lunged, movements unnaturally fast. An arm wrapped around her, something pressed over her face. Within seconds, he dragged her out of view, behind the wide trunk of the tree. One final frame caught the frantic flailing of tiny legs, then nothing. The last image, a small white shoe tipped on its side in the muddy grass. Nothing else remained. The security footage was rushed to police headquarters, but the image was poor, distorted by distance and backlight. The man's face obscured by the brim of his cap. He stood at an angle, revealing only a shoulder and arm. No vehicle, no accomplice, no witness could recall anything clearly. No identity, no clear clue, just one white shoe left behind. The police cordoned off the park and collected footage from every camera within a 300-meter radius. But like the first, all were too grainy, too distant. He'd come like a ghost and vanished the same way. "We are continuing the investigation," said the officer at the first press briefing, fatigue heavy in his eyes. "If anyone has any information regarding the girl or the man in this video, please contact us immediately." Since that day, Emily returned to the park daily. Rain or shine, she would sit silently beneath the tree where Amanda used to draw on the grass, sometimes with Amanda's old pillow clutched to her chest, sometimes with the threadbare fabric bear her daughter had once adored. She carried Amanda's picture everywhere, door to door, store to store, street corner to street corner. She taped it to lampposts, bus stops, cafe windows. A little girl with off-center blonde pigtails, wide round eyes, and a crooked smile, a face now hauntingly familiar to the entire neighborhood. "If you see her, please, please let me know," she whispered, every day, like a prayer. Someone once said they thought they saw Amanda with a dog that day, a large, dark-furred dog, vaguely familiar, but no one knew what happened after. No one saw who took it. No one knew where it came from. The lead faded like smoke. Time passed. The searches grew fewer. But Emily never stopped. Each step she took was a fragile act of survival. Each flyer she posted a flicker of hope that somewhere her daughter was still alive. Elsewhere, in a small ranger station near the borderlands, Amanda had yet to speak a single word. She sat utterly still, like a stone, swallowed inside a jacket far too big for her, the sleeves trailing past her hands, the hem nearly reaching her ankles. Her hair was tangled and matted, her eyes dark-circled from sleeplessness, her face hollowed and drained of any trace of childhood. The ranger, a man in his early 40s named Tom, was no trained psychologist, but after over 20 years of service, he recognized that look. It was the look of a small, living creature who had been pushed to the very edge of fear, then swallowed whole by silence. He called to her softly, several times. No response. When he poured water and placed the glass on the table, she recoiled. When he opened the door to make a phone call outside, she flinched, as if bracing for something awful. She sat with her limbs drawn in, her gaze averted. Even her breath seemed to be trapped somewhere deep within her chest. Tom understood. This wasn't just a lost child. This was a child who had walked through darkness. Without hesitation, he picked up the phone and called the local sheriff's office. "I believe I have a special case here," he said quietly. "A girl, about 5 years old, mute, exhibiting signs of severe psychological trauma. She was found deep in the forest, discovered by our patrol dog during a sweep. On the other end, the dispatcher asked for a photograph. Tom looked down at the little girl, curled in the corner of the room, like a bird that had just slipped from a snare. He gently asked for her permission, then took a photo from a respectful distance, capturing her smudged face, the torn dress stained with mud, and those pale, glassy blue eyes. He sent the image through the secure internal system directly to the state police's missing persons database. A short while later, the first reply arrived. We have a potential match, a missing child named Amanda Miller, age 5, reported abducted over a month ago from a Central Park in New Haven. Tom immediately pulled up the details. White dress with purple flowers, a small crescent-shaped scar behind the right ear, light blonde hair, blue eyes. One by one, each detail clicked into place like pieces of a long scattered puzzle. He turned back toward the girl, still motionless by the window, where Max, the station search dog, now lay beside her with his head resting near her foot like a silent sentinel. Tom exhaled slowly. Maybe, just maybe, one child had been found. Amanda still sat there, bathed in the pale hush of morning light, her tiny frame swallowed by the faded fabric of an old armchair. Her thin hands rested on her lap, trembling ever so slightly, like fragile leaves caught in a breeze. The ranger who had rescued her, Tom, had tried everything: gentle questions, a cup of warm milk placed within reach, a soft pink towel folded beside her hand. But Amanda didn't react. It was as if her spirit was still somewhere far away, trapped inside a nightmare with no end. Local police had arrived. Their words came in clipped exchanges, their eyes shifting from doubt to tension. The process of confirming her identity stalled. Amanda responded to nothing. She didn't nod, didn't shake her head, didn't lift a finger or even write her name. Most 5-year-olds chirped like birds. Amanda was silent, like a faded shadow. One investigator sighed. They agreed on the only remaining option: a DNA test. A woman stepped forward gently, gloved hands immaculate, and brought a swab to the inside of Amanda's cheek. The child flinched, but didn't resist. Her pale blue eyes remained motionless, still as a frozen lake. We have a hair sample from her mother on file. We'll run a match. The room fell into a mother's silence, long and taut, like a sob swallowed too deep to surface. 3 days passed. Then the result came in. Bold letters on the report left no room for doubt. 99.99% match with Emily Miller. Tom, the ranger who had cared for Amanda, was the first to receive the news. He read it once, then again, and once more after that. His heart pounded in his chest. He had suspected, but only now, with proof etched in science, did the breath he'd been holding for days finally escape. State police in New Haven were contacted immediately. An urgent call was placed to the only person they knew could never refuse to answer: Emily Miller. When the phone rang, she was sitting beneath the familiar maple tree where Amanda had once sketched on the last day anyone saw her. The officer's voice on the other end tried to remain calm. "Mrs. Miller, we believe we've found Amanda." There was a pause. "What? Amanda? Are you... Is this real?" "Yes, ma'am. A little girl was found up north near a ranger station. We ran a DNA comparison. The sample matches the one you submitted." "Oh my God." Her hand flew to her chest, her body swaying. You found her?" "We believe so. She's safe and being cared for, but she hasn't spoken. We need you to come confirm." The phone slipped from her fingers, falling onto the gravel path below. She stood up, heart thundering like war drums. She could no longer hear the rest of what was said. There was only one thing echoing through her mind. Amanda. They found Amanda. Without a second thought, she ran, as if the very act of delay might cause her daughter to vanish again. The next morning, the car carrying Emily rumbled slowly down the narrow path leading to the ranger station. The sky was overcast. A fine drizzle had just lifted, leaving behind the raw, earthy scent of damp soil. The world lay draped in mist, still and silent. Inside, Amanda sat by the window. Her wide eyes gazed out at something distant, though it wasn't clear what she saw. The dog lay at her feet, unmoving, a quiet shadow. When the car stopped, Jack stepped outside to meet them. He said nothing, just offered a small, solemn nod. Then he opened the door and gestured for Emily to go in. She trembled. Each step she took was careful, hesitant, as if afraid the ground might vanish beneath her. And then she stopped. Just a few feet away sat a frail little girl in a thin, oversized shirt, her blonde hair matted, her hands resting motionless on her lap. Her eyes were hollow, adrift, like someone left behind by the world for far too long. Emily didn't speak. She didn't cry out her name. Tears simply fell, unbidden, rolling down her cheeks in silence. Then she moved closer. She knelt down and whispered, as if calling a spirit home. "Amanda." No response. Again, softer, gentler. "Amanda, it's Mommy." A flicker. The faintest twitch beneath the girl's eyelid. Then her lips moved. But the word Mommy, so simple, so sacred, remained lodged in her throat. It would not come out. Emily broke. She sobbed aloud, gathering her daughter into her arms, holding her as if one breath apart would mean losing her again. At first, Amanda was stiff, frozen, but slowly, her arms rose, and for the first time, those tiny hands reached back and held on. No words were needed. The child had been found, and the journey home, at last, had begun. But the greatest questions remained unanswered. Who had taken Amanda? And where had she been all this time? The moment Amanda was found, police moved swiftly to seal off the stretch of forest where she had been discovered. But the rain from the night before had washed everything clean. There were no tents, no cabins, no footprints. Only damp earth, broken branches, and the lingering scent of rotting leaves. Max, the ranger dog who had first found her, was brought back to search again. He sniffed the ground with purpose, circling once, twice, but each time he returned to the same spot and lay down, as if whatever trail had once existed had now dissolved into the woods. The surrounding area was vast and tangled, brushing the edge of the state border. No surveillance cameras, no witnesses. The investigation into where Amanda had been held was reluctantly put on hold. With no physical evidence to follow, law enforcement turned their focus to the only source of truth left, Amanda herself. But the little girl remains locked in silence, a soul caught somewhere between trauma and survival, the only one who might hold the key, yet unable to speak. Amanda came home. The little room was just as she had left it, toys neatly arranged on the shelf, the old stuffed bear placed back upon her pillow, and the window cracked open to let in the morning sun. But none of it made Amanda blink. She entered like a shadow, no glancing around, no reaction. When Emily knelt and wrapped her arms around her daughter, Amanda didn't flinch or pull away. But her body was rigid, her eyes vacant, fixed on something far beyond the walls of that room, as if she no longer belonged to this place. A week passed. Amanda still didn't speak. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She wouldn't eat unless prompted. She couldn't sleep without medication. The doctors gave it a name: severe post-traumatic stress disorder. She was trapped in a frozen corridor of memory, one no one else could reach. Each morning, her mother sat beside her, telling stories from the time before, her voice soft, steady, hopeful, waiting for the smallest sign, a blink, a nod, anything. But there was nothing. Amanda sat by the window, clutching her old bear, her eyes gazing through the glass as if seeking shelter in a world beyond it. The first therapy sessions began. A white table, a box of crayons, blank paper. Amanda picked up a black crayon and drew, then colored in the whole page. 1, 2, 5 sheets, all of them thick, chaotic swirls of black, like nests of tangled shadow. Sometimes she didn't draw at all. She tore the paper, one sheet at a time, tiny pieces fluttering to the floor like ash. The therapist said quietly, "She's not ready to speak. It may take time." But time was becoming the thing her parents feared most. Late at night, Emily sat alone in the kitchen, her eyes sunken from sleeplessness, fingers clutching one of Amanda's small socks. Jacob stood in the doorway, silent, unsure whether to go to her or let her be. Neither spoke. The silence in the house was so heavy, it felt as if it could be cut with a knife. And Amanda? She still sat by the window. The breeze stirred her fine pale hair. Her gaze touched no one. She had returned home, but it was as if her soul was still wandering deep among the forest's shadows, in a place no one else could follow. After months of therapy with no progress, Amanda remained locked in silence. She didn't speak, didn't respond to her parents' voices, and wouldn't meet anyone's gaze. Play therapy, painting, music, all had failed. Only pages filled with thick black strokes or torn, crumpled remnants of once-colored drawings remained. The therapist proposed a special intervention, animal-assisted therapy, specifically with a trained dog capable of connecting with severely traumatized patients. Weeks later, the Miller family welcomed Nick, a retired German Shepherd. Nick had once served in a rapid response rescue unit, credited with saving 3 lives from the rubble of a landslide. But during that final mission, he had suffered an injury to his leg and lost the handler who had been his closest companion for years. Since then, Nick had grown quiet. He didn't bark much. He avoided noise. He steered clear of strangers. But in his amber eyes, shadowed and deep, there was something old, something that had survived grief. At first, Amanda paid him little attention, or if she did, it was only in fleeting, guarded glances, as if he were some unfamiliar object, possibly dangerous. When she curled up by the window, Nick would lie a few steps away. No barking, no touching, no eager, tail-wagging bids for affection. He simply lay there, head resting on his front paws, his golden gaze softening whenever it turned her way. Even when Amanda turned her back, even when she gave no sign she knew he was there, Nick stayed. Whenever Amanda left the room, to sit on the sofa, step out into the yard, or wander the hallway like a ghost, Nick followed at a quiet distance, not so far as to be forgotten, not so close as to startle. Once, Amanda spun around abruptly, her eyes sharp with suspicion. Nick froze, then sat, then turned his gaze to the wall, or perhaps to a stripe of sunlight on the floor, as if he'd never been watching her at all. No pleading gestures, no demands, just presence. On the third night, Amanda awoke from a nightmare, drenched in cold sweat. And there he was, a still figure in the doorway, ears perked, eyes half-lidded, head tilted ever so slightly. He didn't move. Amanda didn't call out. She didn't tell him to leave. She only turned her face away and pulled the blanket up to her chin. And for the first time, she didn't cry. Nick remained, a soft shadow on the wooden floor, motionless until morning broke. Another night, the temperature dropped suddenly. Clouds blanketed the sky and wind hissed through the cracked open window, carrying the damp, earthy scent of rain. In the small room, dimly lit by the soft glow of a night lamp, Amanda shifted beneath her blanket. Her legs curled tight, her face tensed in the grip of another bad dream. A faint whimper escaped her lips. Then, a stifled sob. She bolted upright, clutching the blanket with both hands, eyes wide but unfocused, her whole body trembling like a fragile leaf caught in the first wind of winter. From across the room, Nick lifted his head. He didn't bark, didn't rush. He simply rose to his feet, taking slow, measured steps toward the bed, his nails tapping softly against the wooden floor like the rhythm of calm breathing. When he reached the edge, he didn't jump up. He only placed his head gently on the mattress, amber eyes looking up at the quivering child. Amanda saw him. There was a pause, a moment of hesitation. Then she reached out, almost by instinct, and clutched a handful of the thick, soft fur at Nick's neck. Not tightly, just enough to feel that something real was there. Something warm, something alive. Not the shadow from her dreams. Nick didn't move. He remained still, like a statue carved out of silence, until Amanda leaned forward, slowly, and pressed her small body into his. No words, no light, only a child shaking in the dark and a dog standing sentinel until her breaths grew slower, gentler, until the tiny hand relaxed and sleep returned. This time, not broken, not screaming. That night, for the first time in weeks, Amanda didn't wake up screaming. And after that night, the silence around her seemed to soften. She still didn't speak, still didn't smile, but her eyes no longer looked completely empty. She began sitting longer in places with light. Now and then, her small hand would brush gently across Nick's fur, then quickly retreat, as though a breath, held far too long, was learning how to be released. The nightmares didn't vanish entirely, but they no longer startled her awake every night, and the white sheets of paper placed before her stayed whole. And then, on an ordinary morning, a morning that seemed no different from any other, Amanda sat down at the table. The pencil in her hand didn't slip or fall this time. She began to draw. That morning, sunlight streamed through the window, gentle as the breath of a day that had finally learned how to listen. The room remained quiet, except for the soft scratch of pencil on paper. Amanda sat at the table, her small back slightly hunched, golden hair falling over one cheek. In front of her lay a blank sheet of paper, and for the first time in weeks of silence, her hand moved, not to tear, not to darken the page in frantic black, but to create. The lines trembled, the outlines wavered, but slowly an image began to appear. A dog, drawn in rough, simple strokes, stood beneath a wide, round sun, its rays slanting gently like strands of golden yarn falling from the sky. There were no people, no defined setting, just a dog, standing alone in a wide, open space, head slightly tilted to the side, as if waiting for something. The drawing was simple, almost childlike, but when Jacob walked into the room, he stood silently behind his daughter, not saying a word, something catching in his throat. On the floor, Nick still lay in the corner, eyes half closed, unmoving. But his tail tapped softly against the wooden boards, just as Amanda lowered her pencil and glanced in his direction. No one said anything. Only sunlight moved, and with it the thinnest thread of hope, drawn for the first time in light. On the day Amanda finished her first drawing, A Dog Beneath the Sun, Elliot smiled, a quiet smile of relief for the first time in weeks. Elliot was a child language and behavioral therapist, specially assigned to Amanda's case. But unlike many adults who spoke too much and expected too soon, Elliot understood a quiet truth. For a child like Amanda to bloom, even the smallest petal of feeling, the ground must first be gentle. And sometimes, gentle ground is not a word or a promise. It's an eye that knows how to listen. It's a dog who doesn't push close. It's a hand that always stays at just the right distance. Elliot never asked Amanda to speak. Instead, he watched. He noticed how her gaze always drifted toward Nick whenever unease crept in. And so he began there, using that fragile thread of connection as a bridge. Through the dog, Elliot began to teach Amanda basic hand signs, like a secret game between close friends. Open palm to the chest, safe. Two fingers gently touching, yes. A raised hand with the soft shake, it's okay. A closed fist near the heart, scared. He didn't explain in long lectures. He simply made the sign to Nick. The dog would tilt his head, give a slow, solemn nod. Then Elliot would turn to Amanda, smiling. "Did you see what Nick just did? If you want, you can try it too." Amanda didn't reply, but her lashes fluttered, just once. Days passed. Amanda remained silent, watching. Nick remained patient, lying at her feet day after day, never moving closer, never demanding attention. Elliot repeated the signs each day: safe, it's okay, scared. Not for Amanda, just for Nick. But Amanda watched. Always she watched. Then one gentle morning, as light pooled at the corners of the room, Elliot made the same motion, both hands to the chest, slow and steady. Nick nodded. This time, Amanda looked, and kept looking. Then, as if something deep inside her stirred, her small hand lifted. Slowly, tentatively, it touched her chest. A movement so delicate it might have belonged to the wing of a butterfly. But to Elliot and to Nick, it was a voice, a breath, a blink, a first ripple through still waters. And in that softest second of silence, something between human and human, between Amanda and the world, began to knit itself together again, in a language made not of words, but of stillness and light, and the quiet gentleness of a morning sun. The days passed, and slowly, the rhythm of life in the little house began to shift. Amanda no longer woke with a start in the night. Her sleep deepened, growing quieter, more restful, as if the nightmares had finally retreated to some far-off, shadowed corner. Nick remained faithfully by her side, curled beside the bed, keeping silent watch with his steady, warm presence. Then one early morning, when the sunlight was still thin as thread, Emily gently opened the door to her daughter's room. She stood still, watching the little figure curled beneath the blanket, breathing softly, her tousled hair falling over half her face. Jacob stepped up behind her, placing a quiet hand on his wife's shoulder. And in that very moment, something happened that neither of them had dared hope for. Amanda stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, hazy with sleep. They drifted toward the window, where light was spilling in like golden mist. She blinked once, then again, and her lips parted, a whisper so delicate it might have been the wind rustling a leaf. "Nick." Just one word, barely a breath, but it rang out like a bell, the first bell after a long, silent storm. Emily froze, her trembling hand flying to her mouth. Jacob felt the air drain from his lungs. Then they both dropped to their knees beside the bed, overcome, tears spilling freely, unable to be held back. They didn't speak. They simply held each other tightly, as though that one name, Nick, was the first key to unlock the long-closed door home. Nick remained where he was in the corner of the room, head slightly tilted, eyes steady and quiet. And outside the window, the morning light poured softly across the porch, a promise, at last, of something returning. Some time later, Lucas Garcia was arrested under suspicion of involvement in a series of child abductions, but there wasn't enough evidence to formally charge him. He sat still in the interrogation room, the flickering fluorescent light overhead casting long shadows beneath his eyes. Lucas's face was unreadable, as if he were watching an old film he had memorized frame by frame. His hands were laced together on the table, calm, composed, disturbingly at ease. "We have testimony," the investigator said, slamming a file onto the metal table. "And a security video. Blurry, yes, but clear enough to know that you were the last person seen approaching Amanda Miller." Lucas only smirked, a thin, paper-dry curl of the lips that never reached his eyes. "Well," he said softly, "you cops really are something. A blurry shadow in a ball cap, and you're ready to throw me in a cage." He leaned back, his gaze drifted toward the two-way mirror, as if challenging whomever stood silently behind the glass. Outside that room, the file on Lucas grew thicker by the day. Years of missing persons reports, fragmented leads, his name surfacing here and there like a ripple on still water. But never enough. Never a witness. Never a shred of DNA. Never a piece of undeniable physical evidence. All they had were unease and silence, and the hollowed-out stares of parents whose hope had been slowly drained away. Detective Jack said nothing more. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and placed a photograph on the table. A child's shoe, Mud Street, abandoned at the edge of the park on that terrible day. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder that behind that image was a little girl who almost never came home. Lucas looked down at the photograph. For a brief moment, something flickered in his fingers. Then he exhaled, a breath that sounded almost like the ghost of a laugh long dead. "I don't know that kid. And even if I did, you've got nothing on me." He was right. They had nothing. Amanda was the only witness. But Amanda still could not speak, still could not tell them what had happened in the dark. 1 week later, the room was still as a sealed vault. Only the low hum of a ventilation fan broke the silence, and the flickering fluorescent light cast a cold shimmer across the metal table. Lucas Garcia sat motionless, sunken eyes, fingers laced loosely in front of him. Before him stood a wall of glass, a one-way mirror. From where he sat, it appeared as nothing more than a sheet of clean glass, reflecting the dim bulb overhead and the ghost of his own outline. But Lucas knew, behind that glass, someone was watching. He glanced at it, then turned away with indifference. Moments later, the door opened quietly on the other side of the mirror. Amanda stepped in. The small girl clutched the leash of Nick, the silent, ever-present shepherd dog, and walked forward until she stood across from the mirror. She couldn't see Lucas. All she saw was her own reflection in the cold, indifferent glass. But even without knowing he was watching, her eyes held a depth like a sea stirred by distant storms. On the other side of the mirror, Lucas saw her, clearly, so close he could almost reach through. And for the first time since his arrest, something shifted in his eyes. Not fear, not guilt, but a flicker of primal instinct, the unsettling recognition of being seen while in hiding. Amanda stood still. Lucas tilted his head, squinting. A small blonde girl, clearer eyes, but not the same as before. Gone was the innocence, the softness. Gone was the easy trust that once made her an easy target. A faint shiver moved across Lucas's shoulders. No sound escaped the room, but behind the glass, the observer noticed it, his fingers twitching once, then stilling, then curling into tension. "No words needed," Detective Jack whispered to his partner. "One crack is enough to begin." Amanda had no idea. She simply stood there, tightening her grip on Nick's leash like a child grasping for balance in a world that had once spun too fast. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't walk away. Lucas couldn't tear his eyes from her. Then, like fog melting against cold glass, he let out a breath. Long, brittle,
and full of something dangerously close to loss of control. "Kill the lights," Jack instructed. The mirror dimmed. Amanda's reflection faded into shadow. Lucas sat frozen, his gaze still fixed on the spot where she had stood. No one knew what thoughts stirred behind those hollow eyes, but for a fleeting moment, control had slipped from his grasp. A dry click echoed as the interrogation door swung open. Lucas didn't look up. Jack entered slowly, shrugged off his coat, and laid an old file on the table. He didn't sit down right away. He simply stood there, observing, like an old sculptor surveying the stone before the first strike of his chisel. "You know who that girl is, don't you?" Jack asked, his voice steady, like water dripping on rock. Lucas remained silent. "I don't need a confession," Jack continued. "I just want to understand. Why?" Slowly, Lucas lifted his head. "Understand?" he sneered. "There's nothing to understand." "Oh, there is," Jack said quietly. "No one notices a child unless they've seen her before, thought of her, or taken her." Lucas didn't argue, didn't laugh like he used to. He just stared, those shadowed eyes, for once, not entirely empty. Jack sat across from him, and he looked, not with judgment, not with accusation, with a quiet, steady gaze, as if to ask, "What remains of you now?" Lucas didn't look away, didn't answer. His hands stayed fixed on the table, as if not moving could hold time still. Jack spoke, softer now. "She's alive." A flicker, like a cloud passing briefly across the surface of Lucas's eyes, but it vanished just as quickly. "I don't know that girl," he said flatly. Jack nodded, didn't argue. "She stood just steps from that mirror," he said, his voice barely louder than a whisper. "You saw her, didn't you?" Lucas said nothing. "I don't need you to admit it." Jack leaned back. "I just need you to know we've come very, very close." The silence settled like snowfall, soft, but heavy as stone. Lucas stopped looking at Jack. He looked at the mirror instead, at his own reflection. But his gaze was searching, as if trying to find the small shadow of a girl still lingering somewhere in memory. Jack rose, said just one last thing before leaving the room. "The thing that kills darkness isn't the scream. It's the silence that can't be controlled." Then he turned and walked out, leaving behind a room hushed like a crypt. Lucas remained, still. But beneath the table, one finger began tapping, soft, arrhythmic, uncertain. Not a signal, not a confession, just movement. As if he were counting something down or resisting something beginning to rise from within.
Time passed. No one rushed Amanda to speak. She continued to move through the world in her own quiet way. But the therapist began to notice something. In those play sessions where Amanda was free to draw, color, cut, and build, something was shifting. One cloudy afternoon, Amanda drew a picture that was different. Gone were the smeared blotches, the scattered dots of disconnected color. Instead, she reached for brown and gray, and with a slow, deliberate hand, she sketched a room. Simple. Just one large rectangle, a gray square, and a few pale yellow streaks, slanting awkwardly as if her hand had trembled. There were no clear details, yet when she placed the picture on the table, Amanda didn't let go. She gripped the crayon tightly, her eyes fixed on the paper, drawn in, transfixed, as if something on the page had begun to whisper back to her. Nick whimpered softly. He lifted his head, ears perked, golden eyes watching Amanda with gentle stillness. The next day, she drew again, the same shapes, but this time she added something more. A brown chair, oversized and slightly off-center, and beside it, a gray circle floating above a large black form, like the suggestion of a person half buried in shadow. The therapist said nothing, just watched as Amanda's crayon moved again, this time sketching a long, dark red line, dragged from top to bottom like a wound. Amanda stopped. Her head dipped. And then, so faint it felt like the echo of something long buried, she murmured, "Stay there." It was the first time Amanda had spoken aloud since the day she was taken. The therapy room, late afternoon. Muted light filtered through the frosted glass window, casting a soft haze across the room. On the table lay Amanda's drawing. The paper slightly wrinkled, some spots still smudged where damp color had met the pressure of small fingers. Detective Jack leaned over to look, his brow furrowing. "If I saw this without context," he said, "I'd think it was just a child's random scribble." The therapist nodded slowly. But with children who've endured trauma, repeated details are rarely random. They're fragments of memory, not precise in form, but faithful in feeling. She pointed to the dark gray block at the center of the page. Amanda calls this the sad room. There's no door handle, no patterns or textures, just gray and brown, again and again. Those are the colors children often reach for when they want to describe fear or cold. She moved her hand gently to the pale yellow streaks, drawn in soft slants across the upper part of the image. This detail has been consistent. Amanda always includes the light inside. It's very faint, could be sunlight or something mimicking it. What's strange is how fixed the placement is. Every time the yellow line and the gray block appear in nearly the same positions, as if this image has been burned into her memory. Jack tilted his head. "And this figure here?" He pointed to a large black mass on one side of the drawing, above which floated a small gray circle, an odd, quiet presence. The therapist's expression softened. Amanda doesn't speak about it, but every time she finishes drawing that shape, she stops. Her eyes widen. "I believe it's a memory of an adult, someone who often stood near the door, or where the light was." Jack exhaled slowly. "And the red streak?" The therapist hesitated. "We can't be certain. It could be a rope, it could be a scratch, or simply the physical echo of panic or pain." Every time Amanda colors that line, her hand trembles, then she grips the crayon tightly. There's tension there, something deep. She paused, then added softly, "But one thing I know for certain, Amanda isn't making this up. These details, they don't come from imagination alone." Jack leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced in front of his mouth, and sat in silence for a few long seconds. In front of him lay Amanda's drawing, still faintly scented with wax crayon, the paper slightly curled at the edges where small fingers had pressed too hard. He studied each detail in turn, the heavy gray block in the center, the pale yellow streaks slanting across, the black shape with the quiet gray dot nestled to one side. He spoke slowly, as if threading the pieces together aloud. "A room, small, enclosed. There's light, but it's dim, faint, maybe natural light filtering in, or a fixed source through a gap somewhere." He glanced toward the therapist. The chair, oversized, rough, out of proportion. A 5-year-old wouldn't draw that way unless it left a strong impression. His finger hovered over the dark mass with the pale dot above it. An adult, tall, often standing near the door, possibly positioned in control, could very well be the captor. Then his hand moved gently to the long red streak. A drag mark, blood, a restraint, panic. Whatever it is, it's not random, especially when Amanda visibly tenses each time she draws it. He exhaled and leaned back again. If this is memory, then Amanda was held in a confined space with weak light, possibly from a small window or a break in the roof. No decorations, no friendly objects, just walls, concrete floor, and one adult her mind refuses to forget. He paused, narrowing his eyes. And the most important thing, the repetition. These are not inventions. They're markers of a real place. He rose to his feet, gently taking the drawing in one hand. His voice was low but steady. I'll send this to image analysis. From now on, every new detail Amanda draws could be another piece of the map. Tuesday morning. The sun was gentle, casting a soft glow through the window. In the quiet room, Amanda sat once again at her familiar wooden desk. The box of colored pencils rested neatly in front of her. Nick lay still beneath her feet, only lifting his head now and then when she shifted in her seat. No one urged her. The therapist asked no questions. She simply opened a first stack of blank paper and gently slid one sheet toward Amanda. The girl reached for a brown pencil. As before, she drew the same rectangular shape, the nameless room that had appeared in her drawings so many times before. But this time, beside that shape, she added something new. A single blue dot, small as a marble, tucked into one corner of the page. Then, with a black pencil, she shaded slanted lines close to the dot, as if something were hidden there or trying to hide. After a pause, Amanda picked up an orange pencil. She drew a jagged line stretching from the edge of the paper toward the central rectangle, not straight, but winding slightly, as if tracing a path. Finally, almost absent-mindedly, but with startling weight, she drew a red X near the center of the page. She put the pencil down, said nothing, looked at no one. Instead, she lowered her head and wrapped her arms around her shoulders, a gesture that felt like holding on to a memory on the verge of slipping away. Nick gently nudged her knee with his nose. The therapist quietly noted the time, the new details. A portion of the drawing was photographed and sent to investigator Jack. The photograph of Amanda's drawing lay spread out on the table. Jack sat in silence, hands resting before him, eyes fixed on the crude, trembling lines, each one drawn with the weight of memory and fear. Across from him sat the child therapist, her voice soft, careful, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. The newest detail, the small blue dot. Amanda drew it with a steady hand. No smudging, no overshading. I don't think it was accidental. Jack nodded slowly. Could be an object, something that stood out to her. A marble? A bottle cap? Something bright in an otherwise dark place. Possibly, the therapist agreed. Children often latch onto vivid colors in frightening environments. It's the only bright element in the drawing. Jack shifted his gaze to the jagged orange lines slashing diagonally across the page. A path? That's my interpretation, she said. Or perhaps Amanda's memory of being led down twisting turns, corners, not a straight hallway. It doesn't feel like a modern interior, maybe a back route, something makeshift.
Jack frowned slightly. His finger landed on the red X in the center of the page. This part worries me most. Amanda drew quickly, except for this. She paused here, stayed still. You think it marks something specific? The therapist hesitated, then answered slowly. I can't be certain, but each time she reaches this point, her body reacts. Shoulders tense, grip tightens. It doesn't feel arbitrary. My guess is this marks the place where something happened, something frightening. Jack exhaled, his gaze darkening. Like where she was restrained or where someone stood. He rose, leaning on the table. The fragments are still blurry, but we're starting to see a pattern. A blue object, a crooked passage, a place of trauma, and they repeat. He looked down at the drawing again, voice low but firm. None of it's meaningless. Nothing in that child's mind is random. The therapist nodded, her reply almost a whisper. The most terrifying part is that Amanda remembers, but can't name what she remembers. Jack picked up a copy of the drawing and slid it into his briefcase. Still, this isn't enough. Everything's too vague. The therapist was quiet for a long while, then finally said, We could try a method called visual cued recall. It might work. Jack raised an eyebrow. How exactly? We prepare a set of curated images, controlled visuals of walls, doors, light sources, familiar objects. Each image differs by just one element. If Amanda reacts to any of them, we might be able to trace the route back to her memory.
A few hours later, the room had been reset. No crayons, no paper, only a computer screen. And Amanda, sitting silently beside Nick, her fingers curled tightly around the dog's collar like a lifeline in deep water. The therapist sat nearby, her hand gently resting on the mouse. She smiled and spoke in a voice as soft as a lullaby. Today we'll play a different game. Okay, Amanda? I'll show you some pictures. You don't have to say anything. If you see something that feels familiar, just touch the screen. That's all. Amanda didn't respond. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor. But when Nick stepped forward and rested his head on her knee like he always did, she leaned slightly, placing a hand on his neck. The screen lit up. The first image, a red brick wall, rough and bare. Amanda didn't react. The second, plastered cement, cracked and uneven. She glanced, then looked away. The third, aged bricks, stained with time, a patch of mold spreading from the lower corner. Amanda stared longer, much longer. Her hand tightened gently in Nick's fur. The therapist quietly moved to the next set. First image, a corrugated iron roof, pierced with a thin shaft of light streaming through a broken seam. Dust scattered beneath it like fog. Second, a dim corner of a room, light slipping in only through a narrow door gap. Third, a wooden ceiling, weathered and warped, where fractured rays filtered faintly through cracked tiles. Amanda froze. Her eyes locked onto the screen, as if a thread of memory had just snapped taut inside her. Her grip on Nick's collar tightened, and she tilted her head slightly. She said nothing, but her breathing changed, quicker now, shallow. The therapist noted every reaction. Jack leaned closer, eyes narrowing. The light, he murmured, it matches the drawing. Pale yellow streaks, slanted, uneven, dim. The therapist nodded. Exactly. I selected images that mirrored the elements in her artwork. Next, she pulled up a new image, only one this time. A set of doors. Wooden, glass, sliding, and at the end, a heavy steel door. Amanda raised her hand and, slowly, covered one eye, not out of fear, but as if something had surfaced inside her too quickly, too vividly. Nick let out a quiet whine. Then Amanda lowered her head and, with a trembling finger, reached out. She touched the steel door. The therapist and investigator Jack exchanged a glance. That door, it's from the warehouse image set, right? Jack asked. Yes, the therapist replied softly, still watching Amanda. An aged steel door, not common in residential homes, no handle, likely a side storage door, a holding room, or a partition inside an old factory. Jack flipped open his notebook, scanned a few pages, and then wrote in steady strokes. Aged brick wall, stained with signs of mold. Old wooden ceiling, fractured light beams through cracked tiles. Industrial steel door, no handle, outer hinges. Jack closed his notebook, tapping the leather cover lightly against the table, a gesture to gather every thread of thought. Then he spoke, his voice firm. I think we can rule out all modern constructions. The therapist looked up, slightly surprised. Based on what? Jack tapped his finger along the notes, one by one. First, unplastered brick walls stained with mold. This kind of raw, unfinished structure hasn't been common since before 2000. Residential homes nowadays are all cemented, painted, sealed against moisture. He slid his finger down to the next line. Second, a wooden ceiling with slanted shafts of light coming through. Roofs with exposed beams and tile gaps, especially tiles brittle enough to let light slip through, are outdated. For decades now, everyone's been using corrugated iron or concrete. Only old warehouses or abandoned workshops still have this type of roofing. And then he pointed to the final image, the cold, gray steel door. Lastly, industrial-grade steel door, outward hinges, no handle, doesn't meet current safety codes, clearly not designed for residences. More likely it once belonged to a factory, an old camp, or a neglected auxiliary structure. He leaned back slightly, eyes still fixed on the fragments that were slowly aligning. Everything Amanda remembers points to a place that's old, outdated, and deteriorating, likely built before the year 2000. If that's true, we can narrow the search, focus only on warehouses, workshops, or abandoned facilities built before that date within a reasonable travel radius of where Amanda was found. He paused, then gave a slight nod to himself, as if confirming a silent equation. The clues may be blurred, but piece by piece, they're beginning to fit. Then Jack turned toward the window and made a call. His tone was calm, but every word sharp with purpose. I need a list of all abandoned facilities within 20 kilometers of the Amanda Miller recovery site, especially those with raw brick walls, industrial steel doors, and construction dates prior to 2000. 2 days later, at the district police headquarters, a large map of the region was spread across the table. Dozens of red dots marked abandoned structures within a 20-kilometer radius of where Amanda had been found. Jack stood at the center of the room, a summary report from the infrastructure unit in hand. We've identified a total of 42 abandoned sites, one officer reported. After filtering by criteria, pre-2000 construction, exposed brick architecture, tile or wood roofing, and former use as warehouses, camps, or industrial facilities, we're left with 9 locations requiring on-site inspection. Jack nodded. We're not rushing, but we need certainty. Focus on 3 things: outdated architecture, secluded surroundings, and any signs of recent use. Another investigator added, we've cross-checked utility records, maintenance logs, even cellular signal activity in the surrounding zones. One site, Facility number 4 flagged a few community reports. Locals spotted an old truck coming and going several times. No clear license plate. Jack marked the spot on the map. It was an old private training camp near the forest's edge, roughly 4 kilometers from the main highway. It hadn't appeared on official registries since 2003. Long abandoned, erased from most maps. Have the tech team pull traffic camera footage near that area, old data sets too, and get me the latest satellite images. If there are tire marks, trampled grass, or any alteration in roofing structure, I want to know. He paused, eyes sharp, voice steady. If Amanda was ever there, even erased traces can be followed. We'll find something. Outside, the sky had turned to dusk, but within the operations room, the pieces were slowly beginning to align. And though no definitive proof had yet surfaced, Jack's instinct told him one thing, clear as breath in cold air. They were getting very close to the truth. The next morning, at 6:45 a.m., the forensics and crime scene investigation teams departed for site number 4, the abandoned training camp, hidden deep within the forest. The dirt road leading in was narrow and uneven, flanked by overgrown vegetation that suggested it had been rarely used. When the police vehicles came to a stop, roughly 200 meters from a rotting wooden fence, the team stepped out, equipment in hand and alert. Lieutenant Harris, the lead investigator, unfolded the old architectural map of the camp and issued his instructions. Team A, sweep the main building. Team B, head toward the storage units. Team C, circle around the northern perimeter. That's where locals said they saw a truck pulling in. Jack went with Team A. As they stepped into the main housing unit, a damp, musty air pressed in around them. Dust coated every surface, though not evenly. Some areas of the cement floor were oddly clean, showing faint footprints, animal and human, mixed and fading. One officer knelt and tapped the ground lightly, then glanced toward Jack. Something used to cover this part, maybe a rug or a wooden pallet. Moss has grown everywhere except here. Jack nodded, his gaze sharpening. They moved deeper. A windowless room waited at the end of the corridor, dimly lit by thin shafts of light filtering through fractures in the wooden roof. Just as Amanda had described, angled slivers of pale sunlight piercing the broken tiles, sketching ghostly patterns across the floor. The door, a gray iron slab, handleless, with exterior hinges. "It's an exact match," Jack whispered. Mold bloomed on the wall precisely where Amanda had painted it in her first drawing, and in one corner, a deep brown streak ran down from near the ceiling to the base of the wall. A forensic officer tested it. The UV lamp glowed along the streak. "Positive for old blood," came the quiet report. Jack didn't respond. He stepped out of the room, looked up at the fractured rooftop. Light slanted through, casting the very image Amanda had etched with crayon and memory. Then came a call over the radio from Team C, out near the tree line. "Found large tire tracks. Not fresh, but matches a light truck. Someone's been in and out maybe a few months back." At the same time, Team B radioed in. "The rear storage unit shows signs of recent clearing. No remaining supplies, but we found an old rope, a rusted wall hook, and a small footprint, possibly a child's." Jack closed his eyes briefly, gathering every thread, every whispered word from therapy, every trembling line on Amanda's drawings. All of it was converging. He dialed the precinct. Get a full search warrant ready. Site number 4 is no longer a suspicion. It's a concealed crime scene. He lifted his gaze to the fractured roof, where light fell in fractured rays. Amanda was here. 15 minutes later, a support forensic team arrived on site. Clad in protective suits, they brought high-resolution 360-degree cameras, micro-trace collection kits, UV lamps, and rapid field testing kits. Jack marked off key zones: the windowless holding room, the rear warehouse, the dirt path with tire marks, and a narrow courtyard between the structures. Scene techs placed numbered evidence markers on each clue. Cameras clicked in rhythm, capturing every angle of the floor, the walls, the shadows, the dried streak of blood. One tech crouched near the western wall and swabbed the dried brown trail into a labeled vial. Old bloodstain. Could match the timeline of the abduction, the technician murmured. In the opposite corner, they found a torn scrap of blue fabric caught on a rusted nail. Jack's eyes narrowed. Take a fiber sample, compare it to Amanda's clothing the day she was found. At the warehouse, a technician scanned the walls with UV light. A faint handprint appeared. Not blood, but oil or sweat, beside what looked like fingernail scratches. Signs of restraint. Sharp, thin object, possibly a hook or a dragged implement. In one corner, 2 old ropes were found, one long, the other frayed and unevenly cut. They were sealed and tagged for evidence. Outside, where Team C had found the tire tracks, the forensic sweep continued through the disturbed grass. One officer crouched, lifting a dirty strip of gray duct tape half buried in the soil. It bore signs of having once adhered to fabric. Jack approached, voice low and steady. Cut the tape, test for fingerprints, run DNA from the adhesive, look for hair, skin cells, anything. A young forensic tech nodded. We'll get these to the lab. If we're lucky, blood, fibers, or tape residue could yield DNA results within 48 hours. We'll cross-match with Amanda's samples. Jack nodded. Behind him, the dark room loomed, its iron door already photographed and precisely measured. I want the entire scene LiDAR scanned. If there's a hidden compartment, a buried floor, or a concealed corridor, we'll find it. The afternoon sun pierced through the trees, casting long slashes of light across the dusty floors. In the hush of the abandoned camp, only the click of cameras, the murmur of analysts, and the soft crunch of footsteps filled the air, a rhythm both quiet and urgent. Jack said no more. He just stood there, staring up at the broken tiles, watching the light fall in trembling streaks, and saw in his mind's eye a little girl sitting with crayon in hand, drawing the past she could not yet name.
3 days later, the investigation unit's meeting room was awash in cold white light. No one spoke as Jack entered. A thick case file waited on the table, the cover stamped clearly, Forensic Analysis Report, Site Number 4. A forensic technician from the lab stood and began the briefing, flipping carefully through the pages of the report. First, the dried blood trace on the west wall has been confirmed to match Amanda Miller's DNA with a confidence level of 99.978%. This proves the child was present in that room and suggests she sustained a minor injury while being held there. He turned the page. Second, the blue fabric fragment recovered from the rusted nail matches in weave, material, and dye the dress Amanda was wearing when she was found. The side of that dress was torn. A young officer jotted notes quickly into a notebook.
Next, the adhesive tape, the gray duct tape found near the trampled grass. We recovered traces of human epithelial skin cells. DNA analysis shows a match with Lucas Garcia, the suspect previously flagged during indirect surveillance related to this case. A ripple of silence spread through the room. Jack slowly raised his head, his gaze circling the team. The technician continued, voice steady. Additionally, a single strand of hair was recovered from the old rope. No roots attached, so DNA was inconclusive. However, the color and microscopic characteristics are consistent with Amanda's hair. Moreover, lipid residue on the rope matches the sebaceous profile taken from her skin sample. Jack flipped to a small folded map tucked into the file. We also compared the faint footprint found on the storage room floor in terms of length, stride pattern, and toe alignment, and it closely matches the shoe size and gait profile of Lucas Garcia. Another officer stood. Regarding the tire marks, residual soil from the tire treads contains traces of degraded plastic and rice husks, materials characteristic of the forest terrain behind the training facility. Cross-referencing satellite imagery and time data, we can confirm a truck entered and exited the site during the window of Amanda's disappearance. Jack closed the file gently and pushed it toward the center of the table. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of certainty. We have the victim's DNA at the scene. We have fabric evidence linked to her torn clothing. We have biological traces of the suspect. And we have spatial, temporal, and behavioral correlations. I believe it's time for the next step. He turned toward the Rapid Response Unit commander. Secure a search warrant for Lucas Garcia's residence. And this time, a pause. His eyes narrowed. Don't give him the chance to cover his tracks.
The next morning, 6:12 a.m. A quiet suburb on the southern edge of the city. The first rays of sunlight had just crept over the rows of low rooftops. The air still held a trace of dawn's chill and mist. A black SUV idled 2 houses away from number 17. Inside, Jack adjusted his earpiece and gave the final instructions. All units, confirm position. No sirens, no lights. Keep it clean. He might still have evidence inside. Through the internal comms, the SWAT team leader responded. Search and arrest warrant signed. Target, Lucas Garcia. Male, 42. Same address under surveillance since last week. 6:18 a.m. 2 unmarked vehicles rolled silently up to the front curb. 4 plainclothes officers stepped out, dispersing quickly. Front door, back alley, side yard. A firm knock echoed, clear and procedural. Police, open the door. We have a search warrant. Silence. 3 seconds. 6. A faint sound from inside. The hurried clack of a latch. Then a voice, slightly raised, laced with feigned confusion. I haven't even had breakfast. What gives you the right? Open the door, now. A swift, well-placed kick from the second officer shattered the hinges. The door burst open. Lucas stood in the living room, wrinkled t-shirt, messy hair, a phone in one hand, still locked. In under 3 seconds, a tactical officer closed the distance and slammed him down against the table, pinning his wrists. Lucas Garcia, you are under arrest in connection with the abduction and unlawful detainment of a minor. You have the right to remain silent. Jack entered last. No need to draw a weapon. He held the printed warrant in hand, his eyes locked on Lucas with unwavering precision. Find the phone, laptop, external drives, any recording device, and bag anything that might carry biological traces. His voice was quiet, sharp. The search began. The house wasn't large, but strangely tidy, almost too controlled. In the basement, they found a steel cabinet with a digital lock, a length of frayed rope recently cut, several sealed plastic bins containing gloves, rolls of gray duct tape, and an old flashlight, all tagged and bagged for evidence. Jack stood at the top of the stairs, watching the scene unfold below. "Take him in. Interrogation room should be ready." He pulled his coat tighter. Today, we peel back the final layer. District Police Headquarters, interrogation room. A small space. Cold gray walls. Harsh fluorescent light casting a sterile glow across the metal table. Lucas sat on the far side, arms crossed, eyes drifting lazily to the floor as if none of it concerned him. Jack entered silently, no words. He placed a thick case file on the table. The heavy thud echoed, a flat metallic clack against the steel. Lucas looked up, smirked faintly. "Let me guess, another round of pointless questions?" Jack didn't answer. He opened the file, pulled out the first satellite photo. "Abandoned training camp, deserted since 2003. You used to do maintenance for the previous owner. Ring a bell?" Lucas shrugged, exhaled through his nose. "I went there a few times, checked the wiring. The place was a dump, nothing worth remembering." Jack didn't look up. He flipped to the next image, deep tire marks cutting through overgrown grass behind the compound, captured by drone 2 days earlier. Treads matched the rear tires of a Ford F-250. You owned one. Auxiliary plates still in the cabin. No match to any vehicle registered in the area over the past 3 months. Where's the truck now? Lucas's lips thinned. His voice turned curt. "Sold it. Don't know who's driving it." Jack nodded, calm, and pulled a sealed evidence bag toward the center of the table. A tiny scrap of blue fabric, dusty, laced with synthetic fibers and wood particles. Recovered beneath the floorboards of a locked room. Textile matches the dress Amanda was wearing when she was found. Blood present. DNA analysis confirmed a 99.98% match. His voice dropped lower. "Still think this has nothing to do with you?" Lucas swallowed. For the first time, he didn't answer right away. Jack continued, flipping another page. Gray duct tape recovered in the field. Skin cells on the adhesive. DNA results? A match. To you. We're not guessing. We tested. Lucas looked down, eyes fixed on the table surface. Jack leaned closer, voice like a blade. "Amanda's DNA? Present. Yours? Present. Her clothing? Present. Blood, fabric, tire marks, every piece tells the same story." A pause. "The only thing missing is a confession." He didn't wait. "I don't need you to say a word, but I will say this. When this entire file lands on the prosecutor's desk, your lawyer won't have an inch left to negotiate." Jack stood, gathering the documents. Right now, this moment, is the only chance you have to speak and still be considered cooperative. Lucas said nothing, but his hands clenched, trembling slightly. Beads of sweat broke across his temples. And in that moment, the defiant smirk he'd worn since the beginning vanished. Interrogation room
45 minutes later, the air had changed. Lucas no longer leaned back in his chair. He sat upright now, hands resting on his thighs, shoulders hunched as if the weight of the truth had begun pressing down on him. Sweat glistened at his temples. The door creaked open. A man entered. Neat build, salt and pepper hair, gray dress shirt, and a worn leather briefcase. Lucas's lawyer. He cast a quick glance at the thick folder on the table, his eyes pausing on the red evidence seals. "Jack," he said evenly, "we need a moment, privately." Jack nodded, closed the file, and left the room without a word. The door shut behind him with a dull, final thud. Now only two remained. The lawyer studied Lucas for a long moment. Then gently, he pulled out a chair and leaned forward, voice low. "I've read the reports. I can't make all of this disappear, and you know that." Silence. "This is the moment. If there's anything you haven't said, now is the time. Are there other victims? Was anyone else involved? Or anything that might help us bargain for leniency?" Lucas didn't respond. His eyes were bloodshot. A few seconds passed. He swallowed, hard. His throat worked like it was tightening around something too heavy to speak. And then, finally, he looked up. His voice came out raw, graveled. "I want to speak with Jack, alone." The lawyer's brow furrowed. He straightened slightly. "I'll be present. Any exchange needs legal oversight." Lucas shook his head, slowly, but with conviction. "No, just me and him." A tense silence settled over the room. Then the lawyer stood, exhaled. "I'll inform him, but I have to warn you. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." Lucas didn't respond, but for the first time, his gaze no longer looked away. Interrogation room, 10 minutes later. The door opened with a soft click. Jack stepped inside, closing it behind him with a quiet push. He didn't carry a folder this time. He didn't need one. What he brought now was only time and patience. Lucas sat motionless, no handcuffs, no restraints. But the change in him was unmistakable. The smugness had vanished. In its place was something tight, knotted, a tension that pressed in around the corners of his voice and eyes. He looked up as Jack took the seat across from him, their eyes locking. Jack said nothing. He waited. Lucas dropped his gaze for a few seconds, as if steadying himself, then spoke. His voice came out hoarse, rough around the edges. "I wasn't the one who started it. I just kept the kids." Jack tilted his head slightly. "Kids?" Lucas nodded slowly. "Yes, it started with one, a girl, around 8. The first one I saw. They called her Luna. A name." Jack didn't react, but something inside him shifted. Lucas went on. "I didn't know her real name then. I just knew the rules. Don't talk to them too much. Don't let anyone see their faces. And when someone came by, I had to lock them in the back room. Steel door, bolted from the outside." He paused, licked his lips. "The last time I saw Luna was that night, the night Amanda escaped. I heard shouting. One of the guys noticed the back door had been forced open. They split up to search the woods.
I was told to stay and guard the room, but Luna never came back. Jack frowned. You mean Amanda escaped alone? No, I think. I think they ran together, but only one got caught. It wasn't Amanda. It was Luna. The room held its breath. Lucas clenched his fists, his voice breaking. I heard screaming, then hits, but I wasn't allowed outside. By morning, Luna was gone. I heard them saying she'd been taken care of. But I don't know if she's alive. Jack rose slowly, walking toward the door. Lucas looked up, and for the first time there was something pleading in his voice. If she's still alive, you have to find her. That girl, she didn't deserve this. Jack turned to him, voice low but resolute. We will. And then he walked out.
3 days later, southern outskirts of the city, Lucas's modest home, once the site of a preliminary search, was now fully cordoned off. Jack stood in the backyard beside an old dry well. A forensic officer emerged from the basement, his face pale, dust clinging to his uniform, and something heavier in his expression. We found a false wall behind the steel cabinet in the basement, the officer reported. When we chipped away the outer cement layer, it revealed a narrow passage, just over a meter high, less than 80 centimeters wide. It leads directly to the abandoned house next door, about 50 meters away. Jack clenched his fists. What's the status of the entry team? They're moving in now. There are signs of recent activity, and we heard something, movement. 20 minutes later, in the damp, dim room of the neighboring house, flashlight beams swept across crumbling brick walls. A thin blanket lay draped over a cardboard box, a few worn toys, crumbs, and candy wrappers. And in the corner, a frail little girl, tangled hair, clutching a battered stuffed bear. When the light landed on her, she squinted, trembling, shrinking back against the wall. But then a gentle voice broke through the silence. Luna. Is your name Luna? You're safe now. The girl blinked, then nodded. Luna was alive. Lucas had lied. Interrogation room, District Police Headquarters. The room was cold, sterile. Jack stepped in, a fresh stack of documents in hand. Lucas was still seated, blank eyes staring ahead, but his hands were no longer relaxed. They were clenched, trembling slightly. Jack didn't sit. He stood tall by the table, opened his folder, and pulled out a single color photograph. A close-up of Luna's face, taken just minutes after she was rescued from the darkness of that underground chamber. Her eyes were swollen and red, but the light was still there. Jack slid the photo across the metal table. It stopped directly in front of Lucas. You lied, Lucas. His voice was low, sharp, like steel. Lucas looked at the photo. His throat moved, once, then again. But he said nothing. Jack's voice tightened. Her name is Luna, 8 years old. You kept her locked underground for weeks, in a place with no light, no warmth, no air. And she wasn't the only child. He dropped another folder on the table. Click, click, click. The sound of metal clips echoed in the silence like gunshots. A 9-year-old boy. He disappeared 3 months before Amanda. His family still searching. He never came home. A 10-year-old boy, the one who led the escape attempt. He was caught and never seen again. The police believed the kids got lost in the woods, but you knew the truth. They weren't lost. They were sold. Lucas gave a strained laugh,
But his eyes were already gone, unfocused, adrift. Jack finally took a seat across from him, leaning forward. You weren't just a kidnapper. You were a link, a handler in a child trafficking network. He paused, let the words strike deep. And this time, no one is coming to save you. Lucas said nothing. Then, as if something inside him cracked open, he let out a long, sharp breath, the kind of sound that comes when a man stops pretending. His shoulders sagged, and then slowly he lowered his head. He confessed everything. There was nothing left to hide. The case was closed, but for law enforcement, the real battle to expose the entire ring had only just begun.
A few weeks later, the room was filled with sunlight. Gone were the tangled gray-brown scribbles. Gone were the heavy, shadowed colors. Amanda sat at a small table, a colored pencil in hand, her lips pressed together in deep concentration. On the paper lay a simple drawing, a green tree spreading its branches wide, a bright golden sun beaming overhead, and Nick, her dog, lying on his side, ears flopped down, eyes half closed in perfect contentment. Next to Nick was a little girl, smiling, her eyes curved like crescent moons, arms stretched wide as if ready to hug the whole world. Amanda picked up an orange crayon and carefully shaded the girl's cheeks. Then she paused, tilted her head, and looked at the picture, as if asking herself, "Is it finished now?" Nick lay beside her, just as always, his head resting gently on Amanda's leg, the badge on his collar faded with time. He didn't need glory. He didn't need medals. All he ever wanted was for Amanda to be safe. Outside the window, sunlight spilled onto the doorstep like honey, and life, at long last, began again, with a single golden stroke of color.
Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this deeply moving story. Love, patience, and a genuine connection. Sometimes that's all it takes to break through even the most impenetrable walls of silence. A dog, without the need for words, guided only by a heart trained in compassion, can become a companion, a healer, and a light that leads the way to the truth. There is no such thing as a hopeless victim, not if someone is willing to truly listen in the right way. If you believe this story deserves to be shared, don't forget to click like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what's coming next. See you on the next storytelling journey. Wishing you a peaceful day.